Okay, you should be good to go.
Thank you. I'd like to call to order the Development and Operations Services Standing Committee for Monday, May the 10th. I'll start by reading the land acknowledgement. Today we acknowledge that Collingwood is located on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, including the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe peoples, and on lands connected with the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818. This is the home of a diverse range of Indigenous peoples whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors of our society. Next, number 2, adoption of the agenda. So I'll read the agenda currently, that the content of the Development and Operations Services Standing Committee agenda for May 10, 2021 be adopted as amended. It's amended to include staff report added 6.1 PW 2021-10 adoption of traffic calming policy. 2, staff report added 6.2 P 2021-13 housekeeping amendments to the site plan control bylaw. 3, item 5.1 deputation restatus of community developments by Shelley Wells from Plan Wells Associates and Pete Graham from Granite Homes has been deferred by the requester to coincide with the report on extension of draft plan approval for the Panorama subdivision. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the motion? Councillor Doherty, Deputy Mayor Hall, are there any amendments to that? Vice Chair Jeffrey?
Thank you, Chair Hammond. I was wondering if we could add a motion under department heads that's going to be brought to our attention and explanation by Director Farr. The wording is as follows, and staff have it, that staff report number P 2021-14 dealing with part lot control, file number D 1206321, blocks 266 to 268, 270 to 273, 300 and 301 in registered plan of subdivision 51M 1162 Eden Oak, McNabb Indigo Estates, for which building permits have already been issued, be brought forward to the May 17, 2021 council meeting subject to compliance with interim control bylaw 2021-024.
Can I have a seconder for the motion? Deputy Mayor Hall, all in favor of the amendment? That's passed unanimously, and now we'll vote on the main motion to adopt the agenda as amended. All in favor? And that was unanimous. Next item on the agenda are declarations of pecuniary interest. Would any of the committee members have a declaration of pecuniary interest at this time? I'm going to declare one. For the item that Vice Chair Jeffries just added, it deals with the Indigo subdivision, and our home is located beside that subdivision, and I'll just be consistent with previous meetings and declare conflict with respect to anything to do with that subdivision. Okay, business arising from the previous meeting. Would any member have any items they'd like discussed from a previous meeting? Seeing none. The next matter on the agenda is deputations. And we have one, safety in the community by Margaret Mooy. Would she be present, Becky?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. She is present, and Stephanie's just unmuting her as we speak. And there she is. You're on mute though, Margaret. We can't hear you.
Margaret, you have to unmute yourself.
Got it.
There
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I should be used to this by now, sorry. So Chair Hamlin, committee members, staff, and community. I'm very lucky to be here to address this important issue of safe streets. Many of you know that I was recently the pedestrian victim of a car hitting me while crossing a four-way stop, an intersection of what I had believed was a safe Collingwood street. I was left with multiple fractures and with follow-up surgery. I've spent 9 days in our hospital, and I still have extensive physiotherapy ahead of me. While this accident could have been far worse, it made me think about the what ifs. What if it were a child crossing, obeying the safe crossing rules as I had, where my first impact at shoulder level occurred would have been at the level of a child's head? What if it had been a truck instead of an SUV that hit me? What if I'm not the only person to have experienced being the victim of a car impact in Collingwood? Since my accident, I've heard of several others. I am so lucky to live in the community along Pine Street. It is a multi-generational front porch community. When I thought about the children living on my block and the positive impact that safe residential streets would have on them and their families, I began looking for information. I first reached out to Mayor Saunderson to find out what the speed limits were. From a staff member, I was informed that unless posted, the maximum speed is limited to 50 kilometers in cities, towns, and villages. This is the same speed that is posted from the first traffic circle east of Collingwood coming into town along Highway 26. While there are some commercial entrances there are no homes, no residential driveways, and few pedestrians, notably a very low percentage of children. The comparison here is obvious. Our residential streets allow the same speed as a provincial roadway. In my opinion, this is not safe. I also noticed that other Simcoe County communities were also looking at protecting their residents by examining how to make their streets safer. One example was a blanket lowering of the speed limit to 40 kilometers per hour. I would propose making all our residential community streets community safe zones by lowering the permitted speed to 40 kilometers an hour. Many residents may object to this blanket lowering of speed, and then I would respectfully refer them to the mandatory seatbelt traffic law that was enacted during the late 70s. If you think about safety first, not unlike lowering our speed limits, the majority has come to accept this law to protect us. Specific to Pine Street, we have a challenge that is the result of our growing population, impatient drivers, and an increasing number of trucks and passenger vehicles. Many motorists use Pine Street to avoid the traffic lights and the congestion on Hurontario Street. If traveling north, they tend to turn left at the Dairy Queen, then picking up speed, make an immediate right onto Pine Street. Pine Street isn't unique though. There are many other residential streets that are facing the increasingly unsafe conditions to our pedestrians and bikers. Collingwood is challenged by the fast increasing population that seems to have the tendency to drive faster and faster and obey fewer rules. When the Collingwood Trails and Active Transportation Committee looked to council for treating our residential streets as they should, it was stated that the plan isn't to prevent vehicle traffic, but to discourage it and make it harder to drive from one end of Maple Street at that point to the other as a bypass to Hurontario Street. We feel the same way about Pine Street. If the project for Maple Street progresses, that will have a big impact on Pine Street. Even more traffic will use Pine Street or one of the other tree streets as a shorter route. Again, quoting the Active Trails submission, it's time to realize that the infrastructure doesn't have to be expensive to act as a high quality, safe connection for pedestrians and cyclists. I have read that speed humps, not bumps, can lower speed to 15 kilometers per hour. I have read the traffic calming staff report that's being presented here tonight. It proposes that the safety of pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers is an important consideration. It thoroughly explains the types of a variety of traffic calming methods. It claims that lowering speed limits, though, has been shown to have little effect and that the deterrent of a fine is simply not sufficient. The report then proceeds to put the onus on the public to make a complaint, then collect signatures on a petition before the safety of a residential street is considered for traffic calming interventions. I would argue that speed controls with consistent enforcement and a presence of traffic enforcers would contribute greatly to the safety of our community. Springwater had it right when they created community safety zones to show they consider the safety of its residents a priority. I hope that it will not take more accidents such as mine to lower the speed limits within the residential neighborhoods, which are indeed Collingwood's community safety zones. Thank you very much for listening to my concerns, and there may be other members of the community who wish to speak on this topic as well. I've been led to believe there is a student who wishes to speak, and I know it'll be up to the chair to decide when they come forward. Thank you very much for listening.
Oh, thank you very much for your comments, Margaret. Would any members of the committee have any questions? No, looks like you're free to go. Thank you.
Till the next part on your agenda.
Okay, fair enough. Do you have any recommendations, Deputy Clerk Dahl, about other deputants that might want to address the committee? Are they all here with respect to the traffic calming report?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. We don't usually let members of the public speak to a delegation unless there's a recommendation being made. Because they're here to talk about the safety measures on our streets, and we have the traffic calming policy coming up next, I would suggest that they speak after that presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so on to the first staff report, which is the adoption of the traffic calming policy, PW 2021. And I understand Mr. Velick will be introducing that report this evening, or would that be you, Director Slama?
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. I'll start and introduce the other people that will be helping us with the presentation this evening. So traffic calming is something that many members of council and residents of Collingwood have brought forward as a need to address speeding and road safety in our residential streets. So we're pleased to present the proposed traffic calming policy and process here this evening. So we have with us Michael Cullip from Tatham Engineering, and he helped us develop the policy and the process. And Michael has experience developing these for other municipalities within our community. With the introduction of our traffic calming policy, we consider this a positive step forward for community. We do recognize that as it is a new process for us, it will evolve, and we do expect it to potentially change in the future as we use it. And I just wanted to mention, right, this is our first tool when we consider how we can manage road safety as a broader consideration for our community. So with that, I'll pass it over to Michael Cullip to go through the presentation this evening.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And if we can go to the next slide, please. So what we want to talk about today is really what is traffic calming, what measures are available specifically to the town of Collingwood, and then what is the process that we've developed in conjunction with town staff such that traffic calming can be approached in a systematic and a regular process for each application, such that it's uniform throughout the applications and throughout the town for that matter. And then we'll speak briefly to the issues of automated speed enforcement, which is one mechanism of traffic calming that has recently come about. And then the notion of unstructured play or playing in the streets, which again is a fairly new initiative that's been undertaken, albeit wouldn't necessarily classify it as traffic calming, but it certainly goes hand in hand with the benefits of traffic calming. So next slide. So traffic calming, we all traditionally think of traffic calming, I think of the speed bumps. But speed bumps for the most part have gone the way of the dodo bird. But notwithstanding, traffic calming does rely primarily on physical measures such as that, which are really intended to negate some of the negativity of traffic, primarily vehicle speeds and traffic volumes. And in doing so, it's looking to change driver behaviors as it relates to the speed at which they travel. And then in doing so, it's inadvertently or indirectly improving conditions for those that are using the road system, the road corridors, the road allowances for non-motorized uses, including pedestrians, cyclists, and those residents that live on those sections of road. Next. So some of the advantages of traffic calming, as mentioned, it reduces vehicle speeds, reduces traffic volumes, discourages through traffic. So again, largely if a motorist is not able to drive at a speed that they wish to down a particular road, if there's traffic calming that they consider an impediment, perhaps they'll seek out an alternative route. And in doing so, it improves the overall road safety, improves the neighborhood livability, and reduces conflicts between road users. So that stems a lot from the travel speeds and the traffic volumes. And the graphic at the bottom is illustrated or is intended to illustrate what the potential impacts of those reduced speeds are in context of a pedestrian collision with a vehicle. So the left graphic, that 25 miles per hour, that's approximately 40 kilometers. And you can see a pedestrian hit at 40 kilometers an hour has almost a 90% chance of survival. Whereas the graphic to the right is 45 miles an hour or about 75 kilometers an hour. And you can see the chance of survival is significantly less at 35%. So there's definitely a direct correlation between travel speeds and severity of collisions, particularly with pedestrians, and the probability of a fatality, which we all obviously want to avoid. Next, please. So in light of that, those advantages, there are just the same, some disadvantages, but perhaps at a different scale, particularly in context of fatalities and injuries. But nonetheless, we want to bring those to your attention. So traffic calming, the most obvious is that it can increase emergency response times. So those vehicles that have a need to travel down a street at an increased rate of speed, they cannot do so. Potentially reduces ease of access, particularly for those who are residing within those streets. Depending upon the solution and the engineering and the construction that needs to be implemented to implement those solutions, it can be costly to maintain and then costly to divert, or sorry, costly to construct and costly to maintain. And as I mentioned, in one of the benefits is reducing traffic volumes on a particular road section. And that inherently will mean that those traffic volumes are going to go to another road section. So, are we simply going to shift the problem from one road to another road? And recognizing that the downtown or the old part of Collingwood is largely a grid system, there are many alternative routes. So if you traffic calm one, does that mean we are effectively going to have to traffic calm each and every road in order to catch up to the problem, so that we're not just simply shifting the problem somewhere else? Maintenance time and efforts through town staff can be increased in dealing with these and maintaining these over time. And then there are, in some cases, visual and noise impacts depending upon the measures implemented. And again, the graphic below just gives you an indication as to what the potential impact in travel times are given various types of traffic calming measures. Now, stop signs and speed humps, you can see they could incur delays of 6 to 11 seconds. And I just want to be clear that stop signs, although identified in this graphic, certainly it would not be considered a traffic calming measure. And in fact, the Ontario Traffic Manual is quite clear that stop signs should not be used to regulate travel speeds. In fact, stop signs are simply used to regulate the right-of-way at an intersection as to who has the right-of-way in that regard. So depending upon the traffic calming measure implemented, we can increase delays by up to 11 seconds, or in some cases, you can actually make those travel times somewhat faster depending upon the intersection measure implemented. Next, please. So when we look at traffic calming and we look at the road system within the town, the road is typically comprised of local roads, which are intended to serve lower traffic speeds, lower traffic volumes, and provide a high degree of accessibility to all of those developments along those local roads. So those would be typically all the subdivision roads or the roads with residential frontages that have significant number of driveways. And then we get into the collector roads, and then we get into the arterial roads. And the arterial roads at the other end of the spectrum are intended to really serve higher traffic volumes at higher travel speeds. So they're intended to get people from point A to point B with as little interruption as possible, albeit there is development along arterial roads, but certainly not to the same extent as local roads. And then collectors are in the middle. They're intended to collect the volume and collect development from the locals and provide access to the collectors. So typically traffic calming is applied to local and collector roads only, and with local roads being the more predominant. Now, in the case of the policy put forth for the town, we have identified that. We've recommended consideration for local and collectors, but certainly town staff have the ability to apply it to arterial roads if there are particular situations and circumstances. But again, it's not the norm as it relates to arterials, and that it goes against what an arterial road form and function is. Next slide. So when we have our toolbox of traffic calming measures, as I said, traffic calming is primarily physically based, but there are non-physical measures. And so when we look at the measures, there are ones that would be obstruction based. So it's going to prohibit vehicles from traveling down a road, or those that would result in horizontal or vertical deflections for the vehicles, or other types of measures depending upon the road system. And then the non-physical are largely based on speed enforcement, pavement markings, and signage. Okay, next. So dealing with the speed enforcement and the speed reduction initiatives, obviously the most traditional is that of police enforcement, but that obviously requires an active police program and the associated costs with it. And then we have dynamic speed signs that are employed in various locations throughout the town, where those would instantaneously indicate a travel of speed as a vehicle passes by it. So that provides instant feedback to the motorist. And I think in most cases, the motorist would respond accordingly if they're exceeding that speed limit. And then a relatively new initiative, or one that is really coming back because we have had it many, many years ago, is the automated speed enforcement. So that's basically similar to a red light camera, except it's dealing with speeding, and we'll speak to that a little bit later. But again, the graphic is just intended to illustrate the extent of severity and the likelihood of fatalities at various travel speeds. So our road system is traditionally that 50 km/h speed limit, in which case what we're saying is that if a person is hit by a car traveling at 50 km/h, there's a 40% chance that it could result in a fatality, as opposed to a 30 km/h that goes down to 10%. So again, direct correlation between travel speed and severity of the incident and likelihood of fatality. Next. So some of the traffic calming measures that we've identified as being appropriate for the town, consider the vertical deflections. So again, not so much the speed hump measure, but rather, speed bump measure, which is quite distinct, but rather a speed hump. So it's more of a gentle hump, if you will. The speed cushions, so they have interruptions within them, as you can see, that allow the larger vehicles, so the buses, the maintenance vehicles, the fire trucks, to sort of straddle those cushions, whereas a standard vehicle would have to at least have one set of tires on those, thus achieving the benefit of the speed cushion. And then a speed table is effectively similar to a speed hump, but it's really got a flattened top on it. So you're coming up across a set distance and then back down the other side again, requiring you to reduce your travel speeds as you navigate through it. And the next. And then the horizontal deflections we have. So if we have an intersection, one of the measures is to reduce the radius at the intersection. So you can see that that's illustrated in the graphic. And what that does is twofold. One, it doesn't allow the vehicle to navigate through that corner at a higher rate of speed. So they are forced slow down and make a more distinct turning movement as they navigate through the intersection. And the second benefit is you can see that we reclaim a significant amount of boulevard space for pedestrians. And what that effectively does is reduces the crossing distance that they have as they cross that road. So that's making it safer in two regards, the slower travel speeds and the shorter crossing distance. And then curb extensions, they can be, again, at intersections or at mid-block locations, much the same that we have downtown, where we're bringing out the curbs from both sides. And again, that's effectively providing a visual cue to motorists as they approach those curb extensions, that they have to pay a little bit more attention and then they have to navigate carefully, and again, reducing that crossing distance for pedestrians. And the last one is the chicanes. So that's providing bump outs on alternative sides of the road. So basically you're introducing a bit of a swerving movement or an S-curve through a road section, whereby vehicles, again, they have to pay a little bit more attention and be a little bit more aware as to their maneuvers as they travel down that road. And the next, please. So other measures would include provision of center medians, provision of street parking. So street parking obviously provides benefit to those who live on the street and those who require to park, but at the same time, it's a visual cue. It's something that it alerts the oncoming motorist that there is activity there. Parked cars are obviously a larger mass than, say, a pedestrian or a cyclist, and quite evident to approaching vehicles. So they become more aware as to the activity that's happening on the street around them. And the street narrowing is a simple exercise whereby, rather than maintaining a traditional lane, say, which is 3.5 meters wide, maybe we're going to paint the road or paint the lane a little bit narrower. So the amount of asphalt is actually still there, but all we're doing is providing some lines that says to the motorist, hey, we really want you to concentrate on driving between these two lines. So that tends to slow people down as they become more concentrated as to keeping it within those two lines. Provision of textured crossings or textured roads, again, is primarily a visual cue to inform the motorist that something is happening, that something is different there, to become more aware. And then the many roundabouts versus, say, an intersection or uncontrolled intersection, which causes vehicles to slow as they travel through that roundabout. Okay, next slide. So in light of the traffic calming process for the town of Collingwood, we've come up with a number of steps that really should be followed to allow the town to implement traffic calming in response to public concerns. So the first step is that traffic calming request. So we've developed a petition for traffic calming that would be available to the public. And effectively what that is intended to do is demonstrating to the town that there is support from those residents that reside along that subject's length of road or street for which the traffic calming is being requested. And what we've asked is that there has to be support from at least 51% of the dwelling units along that road. So it's not 51% of the residents, but rather the dwelling units, with one signature required per unit. And if we have, for instance, an apartment building, then again, you would consider all of the units within that apartment building as individual units. So once a resident or a resident group has achieved enough support through that petition, through those signatures, then they can submit that to the town, and we go on to step 2, the next slide. And through that, upon receipt, then the town would do a basic initial screening. And we've established a number of criteria that would assist the town in establishing, first and foremost, whether this road section identified really should be a candidate for traffic calming. And initially what we've identified is should be a town road, should be a local road, should be traffic volumes greater than 900 vehicles per day. And in establishing that, we've looked at various policies and procedures set out by other municipalities in Southern Ontario. And there is a little bit of a range there. Some go much lower, some go down to 500 vehicles a day, but some go much higher. But there did seem to be a consensus that 900 vehicles a day seems to be the right number. And generally, when you look at traffic volume through the course of the day, there is the busiest hours, and generally it's 10% of the daily volumes occur during the busiest hours. So what that means is 90 vehicles over the course of an hour, or that translates to about 1.5 vehicles every minute. So I think going anything less than that is going to be quite a low volume road. And what we want to avoid is considering traffic calming for roads where, you know, there's really not a lot of traffic volumes. We want to focus the efforts and focus the initiatives and the associated costs on those roads that have higher volumes. So those roads we're going to get a greater benefit. Likewise, we've established a length of 250 meters, and that's an uncontrolled length. So no traffic controls, no stop signs along that section of road. And again, some of the other policies go down to 120 meters, some go up as high as 300 meters. And what we've tried to do is establish a length that we felt was appropriate, again, that would ensure that there is, you know, this is sounding like promoting speeding, but ensure that there's ample room for a vehicle to reach higher speeds before then they have to slow down again. So we want to, again, try to focus that on those road sections. And to put that into context as well, a typical city block within the older part of town is about 120 meters along the numbered streets. So along 2nd, 3rd, and 4th streets, and it's about 220 meters along the tree streets. Okay, so that the number that we're proposing is a little bit higher than that. But again, this is a guideline that we've established, at least for consideration at this point. And perhaps if I can go back to the volumes as well, that 900 vehicles, to put it in perspective, when we look at some of the traffic volumes that are on the current road systems within the town, based on counts that the town has undertaken recently, Minnesota Street serves 1,000 vehicles a day. Finley Drive is 1,100. Maple is 1,400. Cameron Street with the school is 2,000 a day. Peel Street, which is a significant road in the town, 2,000 vehicles a day. And then 2nd is 4,000 vehicles a day. So certainly by no means is 900 vehicles a day an unrealistic target. And then we want to ensure that the road grade is appropriate, so we're not causing issues when vehicles slow. We want to ensure that that road section is not being considered in the past 5 years. And obviously we want to ensure that there is in fact excessive speeding occurring. So that would require the town to undertake some speed counts, and what we've established is a certain threshold. So if there is a posted speed of 40, and then that would be applicable within the school zones. If the 85th percentile through our speed counts is 5 kilometers per hour over that, then we're going to consider that being a speeding issue. And otherwise, if the speed limit is 50, then anything 10 kilometers an hour or over is considered an excessive speed. So based on these criteria, the town can then undertake their screening and determine whether that road section as proposed is the candidate for traffic calming. Again, if that road section happens to be a collector road, not to say that it gets dismissed right away, but the town would look at that in the context of some slightly different criteria, particularly as it relates to the volume of traffic. Next slide. So if in fact we've established through that screening that the candidate section is appropriate, then we may need to do some additional traffic counting or some traffic data collection as it relates to the volume of traffic, the types of vehicles that are going to use that road system, the volume of pedestrian activity, and also the collision history. So we want to be able to approach this from the context of not just vehicles, but really look at how many other uses there are on that road section and how important those are and how prevalent they are. Next, please. So then based on that toolbox, that list of measures that we have, town staff would establish what traffic calming measure might be appropriate, establish a preliminary design for that, and then have consultation with the various town agencies and departments, primarily the Collingwood Transit, Operations, Fire and Emergency Services, to make sure that they are on board with it, recognizing that depending upon the measure, there could be impacts to emergency services. And the intent through that consultation is to have support as we move forward. And that's moving forward into step 5, which is the next slide. So at that point, we've established some preliminary design. We've established buy-in from the town departments, emergency services. And so here we would be able to go back to the community and inform them that yes, that road section does meet the criteria. And yes, we've undertaken some preliminary design. And yes, we have the support of town staff on that. And here's the details as to what we've established. Next slide. So now we have a list of candidate locations throughout the town. And what we've established as the next part of that is to try to prioritize those candidate locations as to which one should be implemented first. And through that, we've established kind of a prioritization guideline that takes into account the travel speeds, the traffic volumes, the collisions, the amount of pedestrian activities, the presence of schools or safety zones or pedestrian generators along that road section, and the presence of sidewalks. And the intent here is to really be able to differentiate between, say, 2 or more candidate road sections as to which one should be implemented first if we had to rank them, recognizing that there are going to be budget constraints and we potentially can't go out and do all the traffic calming that might be warranted at one time. So then we want to look at those road sections that have higher travel speeds, that have higher traffic volumes, that have higher, greater pedestrian activities. And so we have this prioritization scorecard, if you will, that quantifies these different elements and weights them differently depending upon the element and the significance of that to traffic calming. And that allows the town, again, to rank them, and at which point through the budget deliberations as presented to council, town staff can then present, here's our list of candidate traffic calming locations, and here's our prioritized listing that we recommend for consideration through the next fiscal year for implementation and consideration. And that takes us to step 7 of the next slide. And that's where town staff, so that candidate location has now come up for implementation. So this is where town staff can undergo the final design. So this is where you get into the engineering of it, considering the merits of that traffic calming measure, how it can be implemented upon that street section, what, if anything, needs to be undertaken with respect to that street section. So we're looking at issues such as grading and drainage and driveway locations and locations with respect to intersections, presence of bicycle lanes and what the implications of that are, the presence of sidewalks and how we can accommodate that. So that would be an iterative process to some degree. And once we've achieved that final design, we can go back to the community, and again, notifying those that have frontages or have flankages on that subject road section to establish, well, here's the design that's been completed. Notification can also go on the town website to provide some further indication to community residents. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. This is when we're going to do it. And then that really takes us to the final element of implementing that traffic calming measure, which is basically the construction. And that takes us to step 8, which is the final step. And that's really the monitoring and the evaluation. So once that traffic calming measure is implemented, we want to be able to some degree, gauge the level of its success or how respondent are the residents or the motorists to that traffic calming measure, such that then we can use that moving forward to better our traffic calming process within the town. So that could include some post traffic calming traffic counts, some speed counts to really distinguish and differentiate the benefits of one traffic calming measure over another that the town might consider. And then the next slide, please. And then so this is where we would get into the automated speed enforcement, which John Bellick will address. John?
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me well? Can everyone hear me well now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Through the chair, I will present the remainder of the report dealing with the automated speed enforcement and unstructured play. So automated speed enforcement, or ASC, which was formerly known as photo radar, which was discontinued in 1995. In 2017, the Safer School Zones Act was passed, and the subsequent regulation filed in 2019, which allows for the automatic collection of license plates of speeding vehicles. Next slide. So ASC is administered by the municipality in partnership with the following agencies and companies. So camera units are provided by Redflex Traffic Systems. In 2019, the City of Toronto, along with partnering municipalities, issued a request for proposal for a turnkey provider, and the successful vendor was Redflex. So all municipalities with ASC programs are currently utilizing this provider. Municipalities need to enter into an operating agreement with the Ministry of Transportation to get access to the MTO's license plate registration information. And there's the Joint Processing Center where the images are processed and mailed to the court. There's currently only one processing center, which is run by the City of Toronto, and the town would have to join this center and contribute financially. And finally, the provincial offences courts process the tickets. Next slide, please. So this slide speaks to some of the processes involved. ASC units can only be installed in community safety zones and school zones. Advanced warning signs must be installed 90 days prior to a unit being activated. And once cameras are in operation, you must install warning signs advising drivers cameras are in use. MTO guidelines recommend that the first 90 days the cameras are in operation, warning letters be issued to offenders as opposed to citations. And then the photos, once taken, are sent to the Toronto Joint Processing Center, where images are reviewed and sent to the courts and the vehicle owners. Next slide. Costs associated with ASC include Redflex, who provide the camera and units and all maintenance, the Toronto Joint Processing Center, the Ministry of Transportation for vehicle license information, provincial court administration costs. There would be education, awareness, communications, and signage costs, and of course, staffing. So typical costs observed in other municipalities range from approximately $133,000 to $175,000 per unit per year. However, this is dependent on the number of hours the unit's in operation, the number of citations, and the types of units deployed. Next slide, please. So there are a number of challenges that staff found associated with ASC. So whether the program would be revenue neutral is questionable. There's currently a requirement in the provincial guidelines that warning letters be issued for the first 90 days the camera is in operation, and this significantly erodes revenue potential. Staff would like to see if the requirement will remain in future provincial amendments. Also, the hope is that once a unit is installed, drivers begin to slow down, and once that happens, revenues will drop again. So it's currently unknown if revenues will cover the full cost of implementation. The provincial offences courts are currently backlogged due to COVID, which influences the number of cases that can be processed. And the province has to conduct a 180-day review of the regulations and guidelines, which has currently not occurred. This has been delayed due to COVID, and the ministry suggested that we hold off implementing until this has taken place. The Joint Processing Center run in the City of Toronto, which processes each ticket, currently has capacity constraints. So if cameras were installed, they would not be able to operate 24/7. And this processing center is currently the only facility available to do this work. Many municipalities are requesting that the province move to an administrative monetary penalty system, or AMPS, to deal with ASC cases. This moves the process outside the court system, which would significantly streamline the process. The province is currently looking into this, and we would like to hold off until this review is complete. And finally, staffing. The ASC program is complicated and would require additional staffing resources to implement effectively. So ASC might be a possibility in the future and could be an effective tool. However, right now, the program appears to be in its infancy with a lot of the details to be worked out. Next slide, please. Unstructured play. So this was a council resolution in 2019 that staff investigate the suitability of unstructured play as part of the traffic calming policy. Next slide. So street play is the use of town streets to facilitate activity and play amongst children. And this type of program would see either speeds reduced or roads temporarily closed to facilitate children playing. Streets are not permanently designated as play areas, but would be barricaded and signed during certain times as requested by residents. Staff looked up programs in Quebec, Toronto, and the UK, and typically all set up, tear down, neighborhood communications, and supervision was done by community members. Next slide. So there are several challenges to instituting such a program, and staff are currently recommending against such an initiative. The main reason being that we're not comfortable from a safety and liability perspective, encouraging children to play in the streets. Children should be encouraged to play in the parks. Staff reviewed programs in other jurisdictions, and we came to the conclusion that they were initiated either because playing in the street was previously prohibited by law, or that they were set in a large, densely populated urban area with limited access to green spaces. So there's currently nothing in the Highway Traffic Act or town bylaws prohibiting children playing in the street. We do not consider Collingwood to be comparable to these larger municipalities with respect to size, density, and access to green spaces. We ran the idea by our insurer, and they expressed a strong opposition. Questions remain with having residents set up signage. Staff resources and equipment would be required to ensure setup is done safely and properly. There was also concern with leaving the supervision to the general public, given that the program is occurring on town property. Insurance requirements also remain questionable. Some existing programs don't require insurance at all, which we find strange and would represent a risk to the municipality, especially if the programs were being monitored by volunteers. And this type of program could be done through the town's event permitting process, but insurance would be required, which may be problematic for individual residents to procure. So staff are of the opinion that children should be encouraged to play in the parks and the trail systems, and the report highlights some programs that are currently in place to promote this. So that concludes our presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manager Velek and Mr. Kulip. Okay. I'll read in the recommendation at this time that council receives staff report. Oh wait, before I do that, excuse me. Are there any questions or comments from the public before the committee considers the report? And
Yes,
I
Chair.
know there are.
Yes, Chair Hamlin, we have 4 people wishing to speak this time, so I'll just go down the list as they appear in the order. The first one's a telephone call, so if you could please state your full name as soon as we unmute you. It looks like you're ready to go there.
Thank you, Becky. It's Matt Preddy here, Town of Collingwood. Today I was down at the shipyards. There's an advanced light where it allows people to come into the Rexall lot, and I think we need larger signage at First and here, Ontario, Pine and First, larger signs showing that there's an advanced light. Sometimes that light tends to go out near Starbucks for some funny reason in the winter. The speed bumps would be wise entering into the shipyard area. Fourth and here, Ontario is a big problem. I think we need the amount of cars that turn onto Fourth there and the gas station. No wonder Mrs. Mooy had a situation, because Pine and Fourth would be the offshoot of all that traffic. People speeding down Pine, people speeding up Fourth. What an awful situation. And the new electronic crosswalks, but I think speed bumps, exactly, like going into the west side of town, slowing people down, and painting. We need more bold painting on the gray stone, like crossing from Starbucks over to KFC. That area is a nightmare area. We need to push back those. We need to widen those curbs there over by KFC. It's a garbage situation. We need to widen that area. We need to paint wider painted lines. It's extremely dangerous. And until they resurface the construction area, we need to paint those areas, repaint the white lines at the stop signs. Thank God the planning guy took my advice about North Pine and Side Launch Way. You should have seen the people zipping through there. There's no proper stop sign there because of the development. It was unassumed. We've got a lot of risky, dangerous areas around the town, and people are flying right through town. Birch Street needs a light. I think there should be a full light at Niagara and whatever that street's called, Huron. Got a lot of problems around this town with people flying through. And we need those electronic signs showing people's speed. We need to get on this. This summer is going to be dangerous, and I don't think we should be selling alcohol down behind Millennium Park. And there should be curfews in the park. We shouldn't have people dawdling around the park late at night. Anyone in support of that has no sense of family values or safety in the community. And we got to get right here, because this COVID program, it's dangerous times. We don't need people flying in from out of town and wrecking our town and the seniors and the people trying to get around town. It's an absolute nightmare. Something's got to be done about this. I'm not impressed.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Pretty. Deputy Clerk Dahl, do you have a next person?
Name listed on the attendee list is Michelle Kemper. If you could just restate your name just to make sure we have it correct, and you have 5 minutes to speak.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, I am Nate. I am Michelle Kemper's son. I'm 11. I live here at 300 Pine with my mom, and I love to play hockey and basketball, and I love to swim. As you see, I am an OMHA champion. I did it with a very good Adam team last year. And sometimes when I go to the skate park, because I like to go on my scooter, there's sometimes I'm in risk of being run over when I'm going between the sidewalks when I'm going there. And I don't love that, because I don't like to take risks. And so, and when I play basketball, because I have in my, I can't play out on the street, because obviously I wouldn't want to get hit. But even if I didn't play out on the street, I play in my driveway. If the ball rolled all the way to the street and I had to go get it, I have a chance of getting hit again, which is not great. So I believe that if we add signs to like ask people to slow down, I believe that will help there be less injuries of people getting run over.
And my name is Michelle Kemper. So the last name is Kemper. And I live here at 300 Pine Street with my 11-year-old son, who you just heard from. And we live across the street from Margie Mooy, who was injured recently in a car accident. We've been here since 2018. I work full-time as a lawyer. I used to work in personal injury and insurance defense work, so I'm fairly familiar with this area. But I now work for the Law Society and do remote work, so we're here full-time. I've also joined the board of my friend's house and very much love living in this community. I'm speaking to you today as a resident and as a taxpayer, so thank you to Mayor and Council for listening to us. We've read your traffic calming policy that you're planning to implement. We strongly urge that you consider and adopt it, and that you consider action here on Pine Street. We think our street is a little bit unique. We do all sit out on our porches and chat with each other every day. One of the things we've noticed is that because we're one block off of Huron, Ontario, there are a lot of cars that come onto our street and use it to get away from the traffic on Huron, Ontario. And we've also noticed that a lot of people speed. And this is a bit of there's some commercial zoning and some residential zoning on the street. But the further south you go on Pine Street, the more residents you have, and there's a lot of young kids, a lot of dogs, a lot of seniors, and a lot of residents. So we hope that you'll consider that sometimes those cars actually put our kids at jeopardy, and we have to keep a very close eye on them. As you know, our neighbor was recently hit by a car, and we're worried that it could happen again and could happen to one of our kids. So we would ask you to consider For instance, the things that are included in the report. Increased livability is important to us. Reduction of speeding cars, reduction of the number of cars, and increasing safety altogether. So we'd like to see some of those humps, cushions, tables, chokers, neck downs that are commented on in the engineer's report. We'd like to see them on our street. And that would increase our opportunity to make sure that our kids are safe and that we're feeling like we could sleep at night. We will probably encourage a request for a traffic calming on our street be prioritized within your within the kind of priority list that you've developed. And we think that we should be fairly high on that prioritization list. So again, we really hope that you implement the reports so that we can feel even safer on our street. So thank you for listening to both of us.
Well, thank you, Michelle and Nate, for your presentation. Committee members, would there be any questions of either of these speakers? Seeing none, thank you very much, Michelle. Okay.
Our next speaker on the list is John Neeken. So John, if you can just please restate your name to make sure I have it correct, and you have 5 minutes to speak.
Hello, my name is John Neeken. I live at 124 4th Street West, but my son lives nearby on Pine Street. And so I'd like to voice my concern regarding the volume of traffic that flows on Pine Street. Since moving into the neighborhood, I was surprised that what I thought of as a residential street was being used frequently as a way of avoiding the busier Hurontario Street. As there are other children on our street, apart from my son, there's going to be children that are going to want to play near the street, possibly having their balls accidentally roll into traffic. And they may also just want to cross the street to visit their friends. With the amount of traffic I witness on Pine Street, it concerns me that an accident may happen involving a child. There are a number of solutions that could help alleviate this issue, including speed bumps, decreased speed limit, signage, and possibly one-way streets. I would like to ask that you take our concerns to heart and consider the possible solutions we are proposing. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, John, for taking the time to speak with the committee. Would there be any questions from the committee for this speaker? Seeing none. Okay, thank you, John. Deputy Clerk Dahl, would you have another person there?
I have one other person wishing to speak. The name listed in the attendees list is David Hurling. So David, if you could please make sure I have your name correct. You have 5 minutes.
Yeah, thanks very much, Becky. Yeah, it's Dave Orling, and I live at 134th Street West. And I'd like to comment tonight as a resident who's concerned every time I see a car traveling down a residential street at excessive speed. I'm a healthcare worker, seeing what can happen when a pedestrian or cyclist gets struck by a vehicle. And of course, I'm a member of the climate action team, and I want to promote active transportation. It would be ideal if our streets could be optimally designed and traffic would self-regulate itself with other users in mind. And perhaps someday that'll be the case. Someday we'll have autonomous vehicles. Someday we'll have a means for cities to limit vehicle speeds by default. And someday there'll be clear advantages for more people to use alternative transportation options. We don't have those systems in place just yet, but optimistically they're coming. The report indicates that engineering services is receiving more complaints over the last several years. And with the growth in the local population and the inevitable increase in visitors to Blue Mountain when the economy reopens, this is going to continue. We all know that. Proactively ensuring that all road users are accommodated so that people and goods and services can all move safely and efficiently is the goal. And I recognize that together the plans being put in place aim to achieve that. The active transportation framework, the cycling plan, master traffic study that's coming, these have all been mentioned before, and this policy as well. In some ways, however, this piece of the puzzle seems designed more to justify why the town won't do something as opposed to proposing what it could do. Having a standardized approach makes sense to me, and clearly physical measures built after the fact are expensive. As the policy indicates, a solution isn't a solution if it merely shifts the issue somewhere else. There's some obvious challenges to implementing this type of thing. Probably the biggest current challenge and opportunity, though, is GPS navigation, which is a powerful tool for drivers, but a potential nightmare for neighborhoods. When Google finds the route that will save you a minute, people take that route. Town staff has access to the same tools and hopefully as well in the not too distant future should have the ability to access real-time traffic data, be able to assess volume and speed without having to do expensive studies or wait for residents to complain that their neighborhood has an issue and be able to act proactively. I'd like to question why collector roads are being excluded from a policy such as this, and Mr. Cullip had indicated collector roads were included, but I believe in reading the policy it said that they were not and that you had to be on a local road. Many collector roads are primarily residential streets in our town. Volume criteria certainly could be set higher, reflecting the role of these streets, but the primary issue in terms of livability and safety is traffic going at an excess speed, and that poses a threat and negatively affects other users. The policy indicates that collector roads will be reviewed on a site-by-site basis, and while it's understood that physical measures as defined are problematic on any street, there should be a plan as to how to address issues when where they're most likely to occur. And I would suspect from looking at a map that some of those are collector roads presently. There are non-physical traffic calming measures that are referred to in the Tatum report that are not included in the proposed policy, that are relatively inexpensive and may avoid problems if implemented proactively. The cycling plan indicates on-street bike lanes for Finley, Collins, and Peel streets, amongst others. And I recognize that these are all considered collector streets. Lane narrowing via road markings will narrow the effective width of the driving lanes and slow traffic down through behavioral change, hopefully. Bike lanes would encourage people to choose cycling as an option on a street that is now safer due to lower traffic speeds. This will not impede emergency services or snow removal and arguably could be viewed as an investment promoting active transportation, saving road wear, reducing negative effects on our environment and hopefully complaints to the engineering department. While speed limit reductions may not be an effective solution in isolation in all situations, there is evidence that it can be one tool to reduce speed when done in combination with other measures. In healthcare, we refer to this as bundling. Interventions alone may not show statistically significant changes, but done together, they're effective. In many cases, it has become socially acceptable for some to drive at excessive speeds, which needs to change. And there are many people that are making efforts to try and make that change. Many municipalities, including Waterloo, Hamilton, Mississauga, Oshawa, and Toronto, as part of the Vision Zero strategy, are reducing speed limits as part of broader initiatives to improve neighborhoods and promote other forms of transportation and so-called complete streets. Even a small reduction in speed can have a significant effect on a driver's field of vision, stopping time, and the likelihood of injuries, as has already been pointed out, in the event of a collision with a pedestrian or a cyclist. So in closing, thanks for the opportunity. As is the case with many issues, cities and towns must lead the way. They're closer to their citizens, they can be more nimble, and ultimately own most of the responsibility and the cost. I'd just like to ask why the collector roads aren't being included in the policy, if there are timelines on getting the bike lanes painted on streets mentioned in the cycling plan, and will there be a complete streets approach to new road development and redevelopment going forward?
Okay, thank you, David, for your presentation. Peggy, would you like to address these questions this evening that have been raised just now?
So thank you, Chair Hamlin. So I think John can answer at least the question on the collector road. Mm-hmm. Manager Valak.
Peggy, and through the chair. When we were developing this policy, we did think long and hard about collector streets. Many of them, it depends on their character. I think we thought that some collector roads calming would be appropriate and others not so much. Certainly Oak Street and Pine Street, these are lower speed, lower volume to begin with, I think would be appropriate for traffic calming, but other streets such as maybe Raglan or 6th Street would be less appropriate for traffic calming. So we did want to differentiate between local and collector roads and their hierarchy in the road network and their purpose. So we did want to have that differentiation. So we're certainly not opposed for traffic calming on collector roads. We just do want to have a closer look at it when the request comes in.
Okay, thank you for that. And then there was another question about, is that something that we can address this evening?
Thank you, Chair. Could you repeat your question about the bike lanes, please, Mr. Orling? Or the cycling plan?
Yeah, sure. Thank you through Chair Hamlin. Yeah, I was just curious to know, the cycling plan includes painted bike lanes or on-street bike lanes on some of the streets. And some of the information that was presented and in the report from Tatum indicates that narrowing the drivable lane and putting painted markings on the road has been shown to slow traffic down. And I think that that would be a multi-purpose solution that would be effective. If it's planned to put on-street bike lanes in place on some of those roads, recognizing that they are collector roads, is there a timeline to do that?
Okay, so thank you. So through the chair, yes. So where the roads in the cycling plan have been identified as roads or streets that where we will implement the cycling lanes, those are being introduced as we're either reconstructing the roads or when we have an opportunity to do it. Timeline. I'm not sure, Manager Velick, if you can speak more to the timelines of some of those streets.
Yeah, well, through the chair, there's it's when we say paint a bike lane on a street, it's not so simple. Sometimes a lot of the time there isn't enough room on the road for the bike lanes, and there's a bit of a dichotomy between the standard practices. One being you want the road to be narrowed to slow vehicles down, but then there are other standards saying that you need certain widths to provide a buffer between the car and the cyclist. So they act against each other, and we try and find a balance between those two. We're finding on Peel Street right now, we're going to be reconstructing that, and we're having a terrible time trying to just fit everything in an existing neighborhood. People have driveways and they have gardens. There's on-street parking. To take up, you need a bike lane, you need a buffer, you need a lane. At the end of the day, it's quite a wide platform. So it's quite challenging to shoehorn in bike lanes into existing neighborhoods. So a lot of the time it's not just a matter of just painting on a bike lane. You just can't do it. You can't do that. So as for a timeline for implementing the cycling plan, I can't say that right now. I know for a fact we're looking at upgrading the line paintings, the line mark or the bicycle symbols and the signs along Ontario Street and 6th Street to bring them up to code. But as for the other streets, I don't have a timeline.
Okay, thank you. All right. Was that the last speaker, Deputy Clerk?
Yeah. Sure, yes, there's no one else we can just consider now.
Oh, thank you. Was there anyone who wanted to ask questions of Dr. Orling? Okay, and he's gone. All right, so at this point, I'll read in the recommendation. The council received staff report PW 2021-10, adoption of traffic calming policy in consideration of automated speed enforcement and unstructured play initiatives, and the council adopted policy and that council delegate authority to the Director of Public Engineering and Environmental Services to approve or reject traffic calming requests based on the adopted traffic calming policy. So I'm looking for a mover and a seconder. That would be Mayor Saunderson, and a seconder, Councillor Doherty. Thank you. So would any member of the Standing Committee have any questions or comments? Vice Chair Jeffrey.
Thank you very much, Chair Hamlin. Just first of all, from a bigger picture, at what junctures or opportunities were the public able to have input in the development of this? I was trying to recollect at what points. And is this meeting the first time that public have been able to kind of have feedback on the approach?
Director Sloman?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Jeffrey. This is the first time that, yes, we have presented this approach to the public.
All right. Thank you. Through you then again, I guess my thinking is that from my perspective, it might be interesting to have another time period where we could engage the public on the approach and the feedback. And I think some of our deputies tonight have brought up some really interesting points. I like that we're finally here and we have it, and it's a great start. But things like the one-way streets, I do recall the discussions on those before in terms of being able to handle that, and it might, like Dr. Orling said, might make way for bundling. If you go to one-way streets, then maybe you can narrow the driving portion and widen the bike lane and do the other treatments that we need to do that kind of slow it down in a bundle. So I thought that was really interesting. And Margaret Mooy's point about a blanket speed limit of 40 is also another way of maybe bundling what we're going to do. So I really found that interesting as well. So my next question is, we must actually have an inventory then, or a percentage of our number of roads that would qualify or may qualify for the calming initiatives. Do we have that number? I don't need it right now. I'm just assuming we would have the number of streets and know how many would actually qualify. And I do agree with the comments in the report and by our deputants that in some cases, by doing them one at a time, we are pushing the problem out somewhere else. So we do really need to think about that priority and how this can happen. And then coming back to the public input, even though we're only going to have the people on that street agree to whether or not they're going to ask for it to be prioritized, they aren't the only people in Collingwood that use those streets. And the whole town pays for them. Is there room in our process somewhere that the community would have the opportunity to comment on the proposed solutions for those streets? And then my other question was how we identified 51% of a street. I was just wondering if 51% is really high enough to make that adjustment on a street. And I think that's it for now.
Would that be Manager Vellick? Would you like to take a stab at answering some of these questions, or are you just taking them down for future reference?
Through the chair, I can answer some of them. I guess with the communications, our thought was the direct communications would be with the people on the street, but broader communications through the website and through social media. I don't think we want to send everyone in direct communications, but that was our thought. And perhaps we could work with that language somewhat in the policy, that it be more widely distributed. That's a fair point. The 51% petition, we were just looking at other policies. We just thought 51% was reasonable. There's no numerical analysis done on it. It's what we thought was reasonable, and that's what we suggested.
And through the chair, Manager Vellick, would you be able to provide any response with respect to the question about the inventory of which roads would qualify?
Oh no, we don't. We have. Just from strictly a speed perspective, we only have speed surveys done on a very small percentage of the town streets. We have traffic volumes on, maybe 30 of our more popular streets. So yeah, we definitely don't have a speed analysis for the whole town. That would be a significant undertaking.
Yes, Director Slama.
Thank you, Chair. And just to the comment about, some of the other considerations that have been brought forward by the speakers tonight, and other things that we could implement that would also contribute to improved road safety. So, I think that, this traffic calming policy is, one tool, and the first tool that we're looking at. And I think in bringing this forward, right, we're not considering other things that we can do, but I think we just need to develop our knowledge on what the opportunities would be for our community to be able to better understand and, have a better understanding of how we can implement those.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Vice Chair Jeffrey?
Thank you. Not so much a follow-up, just thank you for those answers that this will be evolving and bundled with other things as we move along. So it's a great start. I know we're all really excited to see it, and it's been a lot of work. My other questions are with respect to the automated speed enforcement. And I know staff aren't recommending those. I'm wondering if they couldn't be that matter referred, ask council to refer it to the Police Services Board for a further discussion based on the joint community comments in terms of any benefits. But the other discussion might be the cost of the automated system versus an enhancement to our existing contract that would provide directly to that traffic calming effort to the community safety zones. So I think we could have a great conversation at Police Services Board and dig into that a little more if the committee finds that appropriate. So that would just be an amendment. I would add that we ask council to refer that matter to the Police Services Board. And that's it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Would any other committee member like to? Yeah, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. I have a number of questions, and I will try to address them in some order that makes a little bit of sense. I do want to thank our deputants tonight, because a lot of the questions that they asked and issues that they covered were questions and issues that I had on my mind. So I already have some answers. The first question, though, overall is, the best traffic calming policy would probably be the one that's instituted by design and not to fix our streets after the fact. So I'm wondering why this policy does not address ideal designs for future neighborhoods and future roadways. As an example, the grid design for the most part is not considered to be particularly calming or speed reducing, whereas windy streets tend to achieve that. And also landscaping can do a lot to achieve that, i.e. Lots of trees on boulevards. So that would be my first question. Will there be a phase 2 on this report?
Manager Vellock? Yes.
Yeah, through the chair, grid streets as standard planning, modern planning are less and less used. The pattern of the streets has much to do with the dimensions of the initial block to begin with. If you have a square block, it's sometimes difficult to make windy streets throughout the subdivision. But we do encourage windy streets through new draft plans. We are going to be asking in future draft plan conditions to be asking for traffic calming initiatives. So I mean, not just put in speed humps, but put in something that's attractive, put in attractive boulevards, attractive bump outs with trees on them, and have the developer build it as part of the subdivision. That's definitely something that's top of mind with staff these days. And the latest subdivision, we will be including, we already have included it as a draft plan condition.
Excellent. That's good to hear. So the second comment that I'll make, and Councillor Jeffries already alluded to it, was I had hoped to see a closer marriage between this policy and the active transportation plan and the cycling plan. As an example, one of our deputants did allude to the notion that by introducing bike lanes, they also have the effect of narrowing a roadway and therefore presenting a traffic calming attribute in and of themselves. I realize that painted lines are not always possible depending upon the width of the roadway. However, in my travels, I am seeing more and more situations where along the curb, there will be symbols of bicycles, the international cycling logo that indicates to drivers that cyclists may be or will be present, and that also has a calming effect in and of itself, as I understand.
Through the chair, I wonder, Michael, if you might be able to speak to if you've seen the inclusion of cycling facilities within traffic calming policies, or if you see them as something that can be implemented with different forms of traffic calming.
Thank you, Director Stana. To my knowledge, and the policies and the guidelines that we've reviewed, they don't speak specifically to consideration of cycling lanes as a traffic calming measure or traffic calming tool, but rather I see them perhaps being considered in conjunction with. And really, it's let's calm that traffic, and in doing so, we can create an environment that is conducive and open to providing cycling facilities on the road. So while I would agree that the presence of other automotive non-automotive users within the road corridor will heighten the awareness of drivers, or hopefully will, and could potentially result in some traffic calming and reduced speeds, that I wouldn't consider it as a traffic calming measure per se, but perhaps a benefit or a partnership with traffic calming.
Okay, thank you. There's been a number of references to the fact that when we introduce traffic calming on one particular roadway, it can have the effect of encouraging traffic to go to other roadways where traffic calming is not in effect. But I also read, and I apologize if it was, I read a number of reports today, so it might have been in this one, it might have been in one of the other ones, but that priority number one for effective traffic calming is to optimize your major arterial roads so that they are attractive for drivers who are on a mission to get through an area as efficiently as possible. Note I didn't say as quickly as. And so, for example, synchronized lights and so on, just make major arterial roadways more attractive and easier to use. That was, can we speak to any plan in Collingwood for doing that? As an example, we don't have synchronized lights on First Street. Is this something that we could do? to get some of the traffic off of the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th streets.
Who would like
Yes,
to speak to that? Manager Velick, thank you.
yes, I can. And through the chair, First Street is synchronized. It's synchronized from here, Ontario, all the way to High Street. Their timing is programmed together. They're connected. We had all of that reviewed during the last master transportation study update. We had that timing all looked at to make sure it was programmed probably 10 years ago, and we had it looked at and tweaked as necessary. But I absolutely agree. If you have effective arterial roads, it will will incentivize people from taking shortcuts through residential neighborhoods. On the traffic coordination, it is my intention to review whether we can coordinate when the Finley signals are eventually warranted at Finley and here, Ontario, to coordinate those signals from Finley down through to Collins. I think there's opportunity there. Technologies have improved in that you no longer need to bury a duct. You can do it wirelessly. It's not a big expense. So we would be looking at that for sure.
Great. Okay. Thank you. So I apologize. I had thought maybe it just feels like they're not.
It's timed in one direction because of the mountain. It's timed one way. It's coordinated in one direction in the morning and the other direction in the evening. So it gives priority based on people going to the mountain and leaving the mountain.
Okay. Is that
so if you're going the other way? Yeah, it's not going to feel like that.
Is it that optimum? Like, is there room for improvement there?
Well, we had it checked in 2019. Like we had the consultant review all the timing plans given the new traffic patterns, and they said it was optimized. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I'll speak about screening criteria now. Thank you, Mr. Cullip, for giving us some ideas of what 900 average daily vehicles, what streets we have in this community that are at that level or above, because that certainly does give me anyway a sense that the roads that might be of most interest to our residents would likely fall within that particular parameter anyway. I was a little surprised / disappointed that we didn't investigate the notion or propose the notion of reducing speeds to 40 kilometers per hour, outside of school zones. I am seeing 40 kilometers per hour in the most surprising places in other areas not too far from here. I'm thinking of Trafalgar Road down near Ballinafad, where through the entire downtown, it's 40 kilometers, even though it is a county road. Just was consideration given to that to reduce speeds on more roadways to 40?
Manager Vella, or
Go ahead, John.
Through the chair, the policy did not look at reducing speeds townwide. I think that's a quite a significant policy change, and I think should be reviewed on its own in isolation. That's something certainly, if council wishes to do so, we can do at a future date. But we did not include that as a measure within our policy. No.
I guess the reason why it concerned me was also because this whole trigger of traffic proceeding, or how difficult it was to hit the trigger for speeding when we're using the standards that we use today, like the 85th percentile and kilometers above the 85th percentile and so on, it seems to me that a number of times where residents have come and asked us if there was opportunity to introduce traffic calming or speed reductions, that they weren't able to achieve that trigger, even though their perception is that vehicles are traveling too fast. And as a resident, you know what, I believe that perception is reality to some degree. And by reducing speed to 40 kilometers an hour, it seems we would be more likely to hit that number.
Yes, Director Slama.
So I think, you know, what we have, thank you, Chair Hamlin. So what we brought forward through the policy and the consideration of the differential in the speeding at the 85th percentile, like I know that the 85th percentile is a very typical measurement that's, you know, referenced with when you look at speeding in the industry. And we have presented that differential, and I think the intention is, you know, as we implement this policy, we work through some requests. We'll have a better understanding if those differentials are appropriate or not. And, you know, before we brought that criteria forward, you know, Manager Velick did, you know, look at this criteria with some of the streets where we know we have received concerns, and, you know, those, all the criteria, most of that criteria was triggered, right? So we're confident that on the streets where we have received concerns, they would fit, they would qualify to go through the next step of the policy. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, John.
No.
Okay.
Thank you. Now, there are multiple criteria to qualify a street or potentially to qualify a street for traffic calming. Does every single one of those criteria have to be met? So as an example, if speed were not met, but the other factors were, would that street still qualify for traffic calming?
Through the chair, yes, they all have to be met. It has to be a local street. It has to have a minimum volume, and it has to have, you know, that minimum speed.
Okay. That would be a concern of mine. Okay, I'll move on to the section on automated speed enforcement. And I would agree with staff's recommendation that we hold on that for now, at least until there's further consultation and further experience for other municipalities. And I guess Councillor Jeffrey's recommendation that it should go to the Police Services Board and have some input from them makes sense. But I'm just noting that in a number of the other reports which I read, that it specifically stated that traffic calming is preferable to enforcement. So if we are to pursue calming first, then that is likely going to be an easier and hopefully less expensive option. And then finally, with street play, you are saying that you are not supportive of street play or a street play policy. However, if a neighborhood comes forward with a desire to implement using the normal procedure for a neighborhood initiative. So X percentage of residents, volunteers, control of signage, etc. Would you recommend or would you consider that at least on a test basis?
Director Slama?
Through the chair to Councillor Doherty. So currently the opportunities that we have at the town for such a consideration would be through an event permit. And so the applicant would need to meet some of the requirements under an event permit. And one item that John mentioned was that currently that includes an insurance requirement,
Right.
which might be difficult. And if I'm forgetting something, please, John, jump in if I'm forgetting another opportunity. I think it's just the event permits, right?
Yeah, through the chair, a resident could take out an event permit and close their street if they followed the requirements of the permit. They could do that currently.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
So that would be a short-term closure.
Yes.
Would that be as long as a seasonal closure on an event permit? No.
No, because you'd have to maintain traffic for all of the people who live on the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I also you did note also that our insurer had not opined favorably on the notion of street play, but I did actually. In the Federal Highway Administration Safety and Traffic Calming Primer, which is the American publication, yeah, I'm sure you're aware of it, they actually did say that very few jurisdictions have been successfully sued over liability issues related to street play and traffic calming. And where the lawsuits were successful, it had to do with improper maintenance of signage as opposed to any other inherent factor. There was one other thing in the process for instituting a traffic calming strategy. It goes from satisfying the criteria, doing the designs, and then budgeting and implementation. There wasn't any reference to the notion of testing one or more design options. And I know that 880 Cities has undertaken a number of very inexpensive temporary tests of traffic calming. And they had done this in regard to the car-free school zones, as well as using street furniture for traffic calming on a temporary basis, just to get an idea of how well it works. And also the City of Toronto did a Vision Zero pop-up on Bloor Street, and we're able to test the advantages of those particular calming measures over the period of 2 weekends. So, you know, before we spend lots of money on implementing calming strategy for or execution for a particular street, it just seems to me that we should consider looking at ways in which we can replicate the test and do it inexpensively before we invest major dollars in hard infrastructure. Just a comment. Anyway, thank you, Chair, and those are my questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Mayor Saunderson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Director Salam or Manager Velik. In the report, it talks about Collingwood having 21 community safety zones, and I'm just wondering if you could tell us where those are and if there are reduced speed limits in those zones.
Yeah, yes, to the chair. They're primarily in front of schools, and the rest would be in front of our larger parks, for instance, Sunset Point, and near the YMCA. And yes, not all of them, but a lot of them have a reduced speed to 40. But not all of them are reduced to 40. I think along, I can't remember specifically, but most of them are 40, but not all of them.
Okay, thank you. And I gather they also have enhanced speeding fines?
Yes, so yeah, the Act enables the fines to be doubled.
Okay, and so one of the aspects that I'm interested is the dynamic speed signs. If the intent here is to make people aware of the speeds they're going and to get them to slow down to raise awareness, I'm wondering how many dynamic speed signs does the town have right now?
Through the chair, I believe we have 2 rotating, and when I say a set, 2, so one in each direction, I believe we have 2 rotating sets and then 1 permanent set on Mountain Road. There's a permanent set on 10th line, but that's a county road. And then I believe we had budgeted one more set. Public Works had budgeted 1 more set for this year.
Yes, and I gather they're about $8,000 a pair. Are the set?
Correct, it's about right.
Okay, because it seems to me that those are very cost effective and easy things to relocate and get out and get used to notify people so that they understand how fast they're going in those areas, and particularly, I guess, around our safety zones. So I'd like to see us move those around. Do we typically, the mobile ones, how long would we leave them in a location?
It depends on how much demand we have for it to be moved. But I think usually we leave them maybe around a month. The literature suggests that they do lose effectiveness over time. People become accustomed to their presence and they know they're not getting a ticket. They know there's not a camera behind it. And they become accustomed to their presence and maybe start to ignore them. So the literature does say not to leave them permanently. I think it's okay, especially around probably a school, it's okay to leave it permanently, just as a reminder. It doesn't hurt, but they do tend to lose their effectiveness over time.
Okay. And well, and I guess that ties in then with the automatic speed zones. I know Councillor Jeffries made a recommendation. I don't know, Chair Hamlin, if you view that as an amendment, or I'm certainly happy as the mover to adopt that as a friendly amendment to the motion, subject to what you feel the extent of the amendment is. But I certainly support and agree with Councillor Jeffries' recommendation.
Excellent, thank you.
And then finally, in terms of the applications by a neighborhood to have traffic calming installed in their neighborhood, how will we measure the implications or impacts for surrounding neighborhoods? In other words, how do we fit that into the fabric to decide if one neighborhood's going to get it? What can we expect the impacts to be for the surrounding neighborhoods? Because it seems to me if we should have a way of doing that. Otherwise, we might paint ourselves into a corner where we're funneling traffic to an area that we don't want to. So I'm just curious how we would assess impacts of installing it in one neighborhood on other areas.
There will be effects to neighboring streets. I think people will take the quickest route. We do plan on monitoring once it's in. We'll have to take before and after volume counts on the subject street and on a neighboring street. It will have to be case by case. You have to look at the grid and see where we can anticipate traffic to move. But it's something we're going to have to evaluate and get a handle of as the program moves forward. It's definitely an issue.
Okay. If that's the case, it seems to me that Councillor Doherty's recommendation that we look at ways to have temporary installations to figure out the impacts before we invest money, because some of these are fairly significant investments, and we want to make sure that when we do implement them, we're comfortable of the overall impacts for our community, because this is obviously it is a very important topic, as we've heard from many of our deputants today, and does tie in. And Collingwood recently has been given the silver designation as a cycling friendly community. So any way that we can dovetail these two initiatives together, I think would make a great deal of sense and maximize the investment for our community. And that being said, those are my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Deputy Mayor Hall, over to you.
Thank you. I just have maybe a couple of questions and a couple of comments, and I'll be as brief as possible. First, through you to staff and through to Mr. Collop and the team at Tatham. Thank you for the time, effort, and the presentation this evening. And I look forward to passing this and sending it up to council for further discussion and approval. I guess if I may, just a couple of very specific comments, because I think a lot of what I sort of generally from a macro has already been spoken to or addressed. One is the fact that the reference to complete streets, both tonight and previously, has been mentioned. And a lot of good work has already been completed within the municipality, and that's through the Urban Design Manual. And I hope that manual is continued to be used, and some of the principles that are within that document could be incorporated into some of the things that we want to look at from a traffic calming perspective. It was back somewhere between 10 and 14 that we had actually gone to the extent of putting chevrons on Pine Street. I want to say between first and second, potentially second and third in that area. And that, and the reason I mentioned was because we went to the effort to actually paint the chevrons, and then literally on a whim, because it didn't smell right to a couple of people, we changed tact. And so I hope that through this good work and some of the principles that are being established here, they will actually create more of a long-lasting effect in terms of a traffic calming policy. And that we will actually implement and adhere and stick to them. Specific to the radar issue, I can appreciate not wanting to implement something with the fact that the courts are backed up. I would assume that then obviously would affect an officer who is perhaps just within their vehicle or standing outside the road. But through you, Madam Chair, to all three members of the Police Services Board who are with us tonight, I can attest, thankfully not being pulled over, but visibly seeing them. I see our officers with the provincial police quite often on the Prairie River Parkway on 26 coming into town, whether it be on the east side. I see them on the west side on 26 as you leave town, a couple of other locations. But I, purely from an anecdotal standpoint, I could not tell you the last time I saw an officer on a treat street, either in a car or out of a car, using a tripod with radar, et cetera. And this would be an area that I would be thrilled to be wrong. But I just would pass that along to our members that, the design build of the 26 coming in from the traffic circle on the east side is maybe not great. And yes, there are people who are maybe moving at speeds that are faster than what are supposed to be. However, I would respectfully suggest that perhaps when it comes to actually using the use of radar, that in town, on some of our streets that are not designed to see excessive speeds, having officers there from time to time would be appreciated. I think our residents would appreciate that. So I offer that as a comment to our 3 members of the Police Services Board. The mention of the 51% through the application process, I would actually just, and I leave this simply as a comment, and that is that I would actually like to see that number reduced, so it is not as prohibitive in terms of being able to move forward. And or if it was to remain at 51, seeing as a suggestion, or it was a different number, that there'd be an alternative mechanism for persons to appeal, whether that be through a deputation to council, et cetera, like people have the opportunity to do so on many other matters. But I'd hate to see something that's upheld or isn't allowed to move forward simply based on the fact that it doesn't meet the criteria of a number that's arrived upon. The comment as it relates to Peel Street, I just would like to make this comment, and I do say this out of respect, that not an engineer. It's more from the standpoint as a resident who lives fairly close to Peel Street. I have had people comment to me over a period of time that Peel is probably one of the longest streets within our community. That if you were to go from Hume south all the way through to Linden, which is in the Lockerbie subdivision, the Lockhart Meadow subdivision, that there's only one stop sign, and that's at Collins, and that's a 3-way stop. That street, Peel, as we all know, has become an alternative route for those who do not want to continue along Hume in here, Ontario. It's become increasingly busy with the build out of that area, especially now at Peel and Collins, where you've got 3 larger rental buildings going in, but potentially a 4th. The subdivision as a whole isn't complete. You've got a commercial application going in at the corner of Peel and Collins. And I just offered a suggestion, and that is that we have a real opportunity to hit a grand slam with Peel Street. Not a home run, but a grand slam. And I would suggest that we start with, at the top of the pyramid is pedestrian and then a bike lane. And then whatever else can be accommodated, can be accommodated. I say this with a little bit of tongue in cheek, but and I haven't been there for a year or 2 or maybe even longer, so it may have changed. But it's interesting when you go different places and you come across sort of interesting things that have just sort of been maintained over time, and they just work, and they don't adhere to any standard. And the one that comes to mind is the swing bridge that's at Port Sandfield, where you actually have a highway, or it's a county road, I guess, within Muskoka District, that's merging at a 1-lane bridge. And again, I stand to be corrected, but the last time I was there, there's no light. You literally adhere to the person who's coming in front of you from the other side, and you take turns in terms of who's going across the bridge. And yet that road is a fairly significant, well-traveled road, particularly during the green season. And again, I would comfortably suggest it doesn't adhere to any standard. It's just something that has evolved over time. It works, but it is the very essence of traffic calming when you literally have no stop sign, no cameras, no nothing. It's just one person taking turn after the other. And it's the beauty and the magic, the majesty of the topography and the bridge itself, and the views that people slow down to take in at the same time. But I think that sort of image that I'm painting should be applied to something like Peel Street. Peel Street has quickly become, as I mentioned, a busy street. It's a collector street, and yet it's adversely affecting the residents who live south of Hume, up to Harbin, up to Bush, Godden, and then all the way up to Collins. And, rather than living on a street that was designed to accommodate those neighborhoods, they're now living on a street that's become a throughway for persons to get from A to C, as opposed to stopping at B on the way in. And it concerns me, and I'll leave it at this, that if we don't build that street out properly, also build out Collins properly in terms of incorporating bike lanes there, we will see a design very similar to what's been built out at Finley, which in that case, it's a wide road. But the suggestion of the wide road there without any traffic calming is just that simply people are taking advantage of the speeds. And we as five around the table are well aware of the fact that we've had a number of residents voice their concerns about that. And that really can be just looked back at a poor design build right from the beginning. So I hope that when it comes to Peel that we, as I say, we don't hit a home run, we hit a grand slam, and we really focus at the top of the pyramid with the pedestrians first, cyclists second, and then moving our way down from there. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hall. I have a few questions as well, and I spoke to Vice Chair Jeffrey earlier about her taking over while I asked the questions, so I'll ask her to be the chair while I'm doing this.
My pleasure.
Thank you. One of my concerns is one that Vice Chair Jeffrey mentioned early on, which was, we haven't really gone out to our community to ask what they think about this. And two things that have come up while I've been listening tonight. One is, of course, the idea that this won't apply to collector roads. And many of our residential streets, and I'm thinking of Third, is considered a collector road, even though it has less traffic than Second, which isn't labeled as a collector road. And I presume some of these things will get corrected. I don't know. We'll see when our official plan comes out. But so I'm worried that residents won't know, won't have an opportunity to address whether collector lanes should be included. And also, I'm concerned that north-south streets won't be included in the Tree Street area. If I understood it correctly, is that the north-south streets are 220 meters between stop signs, and 250 would be needed to qualify. So maybe I'll just stop there for a second. We heard the deputants tonight talk about the problems on Pine Street. Am I to understand that Pine Street would not qualify for traffic calming?
Through to Director Slama.
Thank you, Chair. I will, John, do you know the answer to that? I'm not sure if you looked at those blocks in particular.
Sorry, I don't know offhand. I don't know offhand, sorry.
Mm-hmm. What about Mr. Kulop? Does he know? Because I did read that the north-south streets in the treat area didn't qualify. I just wanted to correct that.
Thank you. Mr. Culp?
Absolutely. Certainly the distance between the north-south streets on a block-by-block basis is approximately 220 meters, and you're absolutely right. We had suggested 250. But what we are looking at is kind of the uncontrolled length. So you're right, if there's a stop sign at either end and it's 220 meters long, then by the definitions as currently set out, that would not apply. However, if there was no stop sign in the middle and then you've effectively got two blocks that are uncontrolled, then that certainly would apply. And again, I think that threshold is something that we've established just based on our initial review and certainly subject to evolution, as Ms. Slama said, as this process is implemented and realized. But offhand, I do not know the exact length of the uncontrolled blocks on Pine Street, unfortunately.
I just looked it up. It's 220 meters.
So how, how do we address that? Like hearing from these deputants tonight, does anyone have a thought on that?
this was something we thought was reasonable, but if it's becoming clear that perhaps it should be lower, we're open to that. It's not a make or break. I mean, it's not going to totally invalidate everything. Like it's definitely something we could look at.
Okay, thank you. The question about reducing speed throughout our town, I know, as has been mentioned tonight, some municipalities are doing that throughout their whole town. They're just saying our maximum speed is, and maybe it would be 40 kilometers if I was voting right this minute. Is this something we should be asking a separate staff report on?
Director Slama, I think I heard that earlier, but if you
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so definitely, I think if that's something that the committee and council would like us to consider, we should do that, under a separate report. I think some considerations which maybe Mr. Cullip might be able to speak to, right? Like if he has any experience of if he's seen that kind of implementation of a reduced speed on an entire town for a community that's our size. Also, I think there is just the further comment that, posting a reduced speed alone doesn't necessarily change driver behavior to actually reduce their driving speeds, right? So it's, we don't want to consider the implementation of that by itself is something that's going to be 100% effective. And maybe Mr. Cullip, if you have anything to add on that, based on your experience.
Thank you, Director Slama. Certainly, I am aware that some municipalities have gone to that extent where they are considering a reduced speed limit across the municipality, and whether typically that's 40 kilometers an hour. I know in some cases the City of Toronto has 30-kilometer-hour zones, so they have two policies, one for reducing a speed limit to 40 and another reducing the speed limit to 30. And I think there is renewed interest in a lot of municipalities that are looking at that. And just recently, in fact, Wasaga Beach had reached out to us on the very same question as to our experience with that, and I think they are perhaps considering something as well. So whether that's something that could be done in conjunction, but certainly there would be benefit to both municipalities, perhaps.
Okay, thank you very much.
Chair Hamlin, I just see that CEO Skinner has her card up here and would like to have a comment.
Thank you, Vice Chair, Acting Chair Jeffrey. I was wondering if I could also ask our engineers to comment on the type of speed setting policy that the town has today. If we were to, for example, change speeds on a certain classification of roads or certain considerations. So do we have a blanket policy today, or are those dealt with on one of the decisions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So through the chair, we do have a speed reduction policy, which deals with when we have requests to reduce speed limits. And that follows the Transportation Association of Canada, I guess, guidelines with respect to setting speeds. Most jurisdictions set speed based on the 85th percentile speed that's observed in the field. And that 85th percentile speeds should match posted speeds. So that's the approach we would take.
Okay, thank you for that. Chair Hamlin, you have another question?
I do. In terms of, what slows traffic down, are sidewalks helpful? And I ask this with this in mind, that it seems to be a standard in our town as new projects come forward. Only sidewalks are to be found on one side of the street. And I'm wondering if the standard was to change and we were to require sidewalks on two sides of the street, would that have a positive impact?
So we were when in new subdivisions, we require on collectors and arterials, excuse me, we require sidewalk on both sides of the street. And on local streets, we require sidewalk on one side of the street. And that's to try and limit our maintenance requirements for snow removal and for maintaining those sidewalks from life cycle perspective. If a subdivision has a very obvious through road that connects one side to the other, and it's still a local street, staff will ask for sidewalk on both sides. The presence of sidewalk, whether there's one or two, I would be guessing, but I can't imagine it would have an effect on speed. I don't think it would, but I could be wrong.
Mr. Phillip, have a view on that?
Mr. Culp?
I'm not aware of the presence of sidewalks as being either considered as a traffic calming measure or as having any effect on travel speed myself, no.
Okay, thank you very much. It seems to me, our problem in, our older parts of the town is that our, well, I'll call boundary roads, and whether it's High or First or here Ontario or pretty, that they're exceeding their capacity, and our master transportation study has pinpointed the date at which time they really won't be moving like they should be at all, and it's not that far off, and the result is going to be more and more traffic through our older areas of town. And I know the master traffic study, made a recommendation that what our town needs is a bypass, and then commented on how, politically that is never a welcome idea, and didn't really go into it. But at this point, I just wanted to ask, is there any progress on the potential bypass for our town?
CAO Skinner or Director Slama, would you have any insight?
Yes, I can provide some comment. So there has been some discussion, most recently led by our neighbors to the west, Town of Blue Mountains and Grey County, in opening up some recent discussions with the ministry about the bypass. And we have been included in some of those discussions. Nothing has happened for the last year, but it remains something that we would also like to promote with the ministry, because as you said, right, the master transportation study does identify that a bypass is what is really going to help some of the future predicted traffic on our roads. So so there hasn't been any discussions of late that I was aware of anyways. So
okay, thank you very much. I think CO Skinner has something.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
CO Skinner.
Thank you. Through you also to Chair Hamlin. Mayor Saunderson had set up a forum for the South Georgian Bay mayors and CAOs to speak, and one of the priorities that was identified in that forum was transportation. And I took an action item in the last couple of weeks to talk with the Ministry of Transportation about this, and I was actually quite pleased to hear that they were in line with what Director Slama had just said. They did have this at front of mind, and we're quite enthusiastic about moving forward and looking at new ways to consider traffic in our area, including maintaining the sort of character and quality of the type of roads and milieu that would make sense here. So while I don't have any further updates, I can just say that there does seem to be interest at the provincial level, a renewed interest at the provincial level to talk to us about bypasses and larger area traffic studies.
Oh, well, thank you for that update. Very encouraging. And then this might be my last question. It's the comments about putting street calming on one street and the traffic moves to the next street. That is going to happen, probably. But it does strike me that in some areas where we can predict that, is it worth looking at an area for traffic calming as opposed to just one street? Have staff thought of that at all?
Manager Velick.
Yes, we may have to consider that if it's quite obvious it's going to occur.
Yeah. Okay. So the staff could initiate,
during the data collection stage and our preliminary design stage. That's when we're going to have to look at those types of issues.
And sorry, through you, Vice Chair Jeffrey. And so could staff, through the process that will be set up, be able to initiate, let's say Pine Street is eligible and they come forward and say, we want traffic calming. And let's say, for example, in your analysis, you think Maple should be also dealt with at the same time. Would staff be able to bring that forward as a recommendation on its own? Or how would that be handled?
You would typically identify a project and then bring a list of either one or multiple projects to council's attention through the budget process. Are you suggesting we would do it independently?
Yes, that's sorry, through you, Chair. That's what I was wondering. Would you, or do we need I guess my question is, should we be putting direction in the policy so that there is some flexibility and it's not always, the residents have to get organized on, in my example, on Maple Street and be aware, but can staff somehow, should staff have the ability to deal with this?
Well, I think if staff recognize an issue, we should be bringing it forward to council's attention and get direction from council. If we're going to circumvent the policy and the process in the policy, then I believe that should be through a council directive.
Okay, thank you. I think there's two amendments I'd like to, sorry, thank you, staff. There's two amendments, Madam Chair, I'd like to bring forward. One would be to have the street calming policy applied to collector roads as well as local roads, and to change the, I forget how the words are used, but I'll call it the distance from 250 meters to 220 meters to pick up the north-south streets in the Tree Street area. And I don't know how. Yeah.
No seconder for. Yep. Okay. We'll have some. Okay. Before we find a seconder, I'll ask Councillor Doherty to speak.
Yeah, I would tentatively be willing to second that. The items that we're discussing are under the town screening criteria. A third, which I have had some concern about, is the speed warrants. So I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to amend this motion to address that whole step 2 town screening to something along the lines of out of the 7 criteria that 5 or 6 must be met, or some variation on 100% of all criteria being met. And Deputy Clerk Dahl, you'd be welcome to step in anytime.
Well, first of all, I'm not seeing that as similar to what Councillor Hammond's asking for at this point.
Well, it's similar in that she's addressing issues on step 2 screening of the traffic calming applications. The number 1 is local road. She's saying local or collector. The number 2 is length of 250 meters between stops. She's saying to modify or eliminate that. And I'm saying number 3, the speed warrants.
So given that we can only deal with one amendment at a time, I can't do them all together. And Deputy Mayor Hall has a comment he'd like to make.
Thank you. Through you to perhaps Councillor Hamlin and Councillor Doherty. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with the merits of what you're proposing. I'm just suggesting that we've been at this for close to maybe an hour and 45 minutes, and it's a good report. There's a lot to take in. And I'm just wondering if, in the interest of being able to sort of digest a little bit further some of the information, I actually even have some additional questions that I'd like to maybe ask of staff between now and the next, until council, that maybe if we just support this in principle to move it up to council, because I can actually see that there will be maybe even further discussion from the other four who aren't present tonight, because this really is quite a document, and I just would rather, instead of parsing through it tonight with amendments, move it forward in that spirit, give us an opportunity to further digest and then have at it again as a whole council. It's just a thought.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I know we have been at it a while, and I'll take the liberty as Vice Chair, Acting Chair, to say that where we as a council really like the work to be done and the recommendation to be made is from the committee level, as opposed to have, in an effort to avoid that big, I mean, there will be discussion obviously that's going to happen at council, but I think if there is a recommendation that the committee deems to make at this point, it should consider it, and then at least we've had the discussion and staff have some direction ahead of getting in front of council. So if that's reasonable with everybody, I think we should at least hash out the three of these amendments that are before us, and work from there to see whether we're in agreement or not. So I'm going to go firstly to Councillor Hamlin's first two amendments. We'll do them separately. The first is to add collector roads under screening, which is part 2. Is there a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Doherty, thank you. Is there any further discussion? Thank you. Mayor Saunderson?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Jeffrey. Just through you to staff, I had understood the answer to the question of whether or not this would include collector roads to being, yes, it would, on a case-by-case basis. Can I just get clarification on that?
Collector roads are, oh, sorry, go ahead, Maggie.
Thank you. So that's correct. Like we do say here, while the focus of traffic calming will be on local roads, town staff may at their discretion review select collector roads for consideration, provided they also meet the above criteria and serve in excess of 2,000 vehicles per day.
Okay,
So they haven't been, they haven't been 100% excluded.
And maybe then, just for my clarification, you could outline what discretionary elements would be considered by staff in deciding on a case-by-case basis whether a collector road would be included.
And through the acting chair, Manager Velick, do you want to speak to that? So you've probably given more consideration.
Yeah, I think it, I think to clarify that, it might be beneficial to include a volume threshold. I don't think we want to, I think the intent here was not to apply traffic calming on an extremely busy road, which would cause, traffic congestion issues. I think that was the intent here. So if that would be satisfactory, perhaps we could go back and look at a maximum ceiling threshold for traffic volumes and clarify that way.
Is that satisfactory, Councillor Hamlin?
Yes.
Okay. And Councillor Doherty, so we don't need that amendment, then staff will proceed with that clarification. All right, so then on the second proposed amendment, changing the distance from 250 to 220 for the north-south streets. Is there a seconder for Councillor Hamlin's amendment? Mayor Saunderson, thank you. Any further discussion on that amendment? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment to switch from 250 to 220? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you for that. And then finally, we have an amendment from Councillor Doherty with respect to changing the requirement of meeting all items within the screening of Part 2 to a number out of
the majority, or actually, because the other two matters have now been dealt with, really, I think we could boil this down to just to speed. So the amendment could be something along the lines of that the speed warrant, state the speed warrant, but say that it is not mandatory to be met if the other criteria are met.
And CEO Skinner and Director Slama both have comments in this regard before I ask for a seconder. So CAO Skinner, you still wish to go first?
Sure, thank you. And through you to Councillor Doherty. I'm going to make this comment as a traffic engineer, having spent a good amount of my career doing this type of work. What you're looking at tonight is a traffic calming policy. It's not a safety policy. So a safety policy would look at other screening criteria that might consider whether, pedestrians were visible before they stepped onto the roadway, or other considerations. Traffic calming, generally by definition, is about reducing speed. That's what these tools are designed to do, is to reduce speed. So if you don't have a speed problem, then your answer's probably not traffic calming. Not to say that some of these tools can't be used for other things. I would suggest that potentially if the speed warrant's not met, then potentially either the speed limit is wrong and we need to look at an adjustment to the speed limit, which might be another tool, which is why I was asking about our tools for adjusting speed limits. Perhaps they're not right at the location. But I would, and so I'm not saying we've got all the right tools in the toolbox yet. I just wanted to make the comment that we were particularly looking at tools that adjusted speed here. So it might be worth some staff time if you were looking for something else, but it might not come out under a traffic calming policy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, CEO Skinner and Director Slama.
Yes, and I was just going to just wanted to clarify this, and Manager Velick and Mr. Cullip, I'll ask you to verify as well, but we do have like the preliminary screening criteria. We do say that criteria needs to be met, and then we look at the speed. So speed is not one of the preliminary criteria. So if you feel that you've made the adjustments to the preliminary criteria with the amendments that have been proposed and agreed upon, then I think speed then is looked after that step.
All right, did Mr. Cullip or anyone else wish to comment on that before I deal with the amendment? No? Okay. Oh yeah, Mr. Cullip, please go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I believe the intent is to deal with the I believe it's 4 or 5 initial screenings about the road classification, the minimum volumes, the length, the grade, and then not being considered in the past 5 years. And if all of those are satisfied, then the town would undertake the speed study, such that if any of those criteria are not satisfied, then there's no need to go out and do the expenditures and take the staff time and the efforts to do the speed studies when this is not going to be considered a candidate for traffic calming. But if the criteria are satisfied, the speed studies are completed, and we realize there's not a speeding issue, as CAO Skinner had suggested, then this is not a candidate for traffic calming. This would be dealt with somewhere else through a safety planning policy or something else if there are other issues other than the speeding.
Okay, Thank you.
That doesn't satisfy me. The whole point is that we may be satisfying the speed criteria, but that road, the speed standard that's arbitrarily been imposed on that road because the standard in our entire municipality is 50 kilometers an hour may still be subjectively, at least, too fast. So
if I might then, Councillor Doherty, I think that the CAO's answer to that was that it might be another process, which is the separate staff report that I believe the Chair Hamlin is going to ask for at the conclusion of this discussion under other business.
So we'll include that. We'll include that. Okay, that would be acceptable to me. Thank you.
All right, that's great. Okay, so if there's no other discussion or no other amendments, Chair Hamlin, I can turn this. Oh, sorry, Mayor Saunderson.
Yes, I just want to get clarification on the your recommendation, Councillor Jeffrey, that the automatic speed enforcement be referred to the PSB. I'm happy as the mover to have that included, but whatever the chair decides or deputy clerk recommends.
Okay, Deputy Clerk Dahl, if you could let us know.
I believe that an amendment would be required just because it is not a recommendation of staff to refer it to the Police Services Board for their investigation and review. That, you know, takes up their time and staff resources to be able to do that.
Okay, all right. So then what I will do is pass the gavel back to Chair Hamlin. I'll make my amendment and she can carry on with the vote for the entire matter. So there you go. You got it back.
Okay, thank you. Excellent job as usual.
I'd like to amend the motion to refer the matter of the automated, ASE to the Police Services Board.
Could I have a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, well, good work. Pardon?
The whole motion.
Oh, motion. Oh, we have to vote on it? Okay. Well, I was about to, I'm eager for an adjournment, which is where we're going next. Okay, so could I have a vote on the motion as amended? All in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to suggest we take a 10-minute break. That would be 7:38. And okay, thank you. We'll just meet back here then. Thank you. Sweet dog. Here. What are you eating? I can say Deputy Clerk, will you?
Sorry, you froze there for a minute. We're live, so whenever you want to.
Oh, sorry.
Yep,
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that.
that's okay.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda this evening is 6.2, another staff report. It's P 2021-13, housekeeping amendments to the site plan control bylaw. And I understand Director Farr is going to present this to us tonight. Over to you, Director Farr.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of committee. I don't have a presentation for you this evening because this report is relatively simple. The proposed amendments to the site plan control bylaw that are set out in this report do three things. First, they formalize the exemption of townhomes within registered plans of subdivision where there are satisfactory architectural control guidelines. This is a common provision in many site plan control bylaws. Second, the report provides a recommendation for delegated authority to the director of planning position rather than to the defunct site plan development committee for minor changes to any agreement or undertaking required as conditions to site plan approval. So it effectively allows the flexibility that is currently intended within the site plan control bylaw to the director of planning, who would, as part of that review, consult with all of the relevant staff in arriving at a decision. And I need to remind you that this is for minor matters that would already have been addressed by this committee and council. And the report provides a number of minor corrections to the bylaw. It truly is a housekeeping bylaw that at its most introduces some streamlining. On the most significant point, the exemption of townhouses in registered plans of subdivision where there are architectural control guidelines. There's a questionable need for putting those projects through site plan control, especially when they would have gone through the detailed process of subdivision review. However, the language in the proposed amendments does provide some discretionary authority to the director of planning to address varying standards that might be out there in the community right now with regard to architectural control in any plan of subdivision. So that concludes my comments on this, and I'd be glad to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Before I turn this to the committee, Deputy Clerk Dahl, are there any members of the public who would like to comment?
Chair Hamlin, I have one member wishing to speak, so I'll just allow him to speak here. I believe it's Matt.
Thank you.
But if you can please confirm your name.
Thanks, Becky. I walked through the subdivision by the Brethren Church by the bowling alley with Mom the other day. What a great subdivision. The townhouses, bright and sunny, modern. Great work, hard work, super hard work. Like the people working in that trade, we need to celebrate those people. The biggest job in town right now is trades. And you know, I get out of order. I have too many coffees, and I start, noticing too much. And we need to celebrate and support the tradespeople that work in this area. South Georgian Bay. I don't think we acknowledge those people enough. And yeah, we have the capacity issue and it needs to be looked at and fixed. But I think we should set up some kind of a special celebratory acknowledgement for trades workers. Enough of the nonsense. We need to let people know that are working hard, that we appreciate and support what they do.
Mr. Pretty.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, thank you for your comments on this, but we're looking for comments right now on the amendments proposed to the site plan control bylaw. Would you have any comments on that specifically?
I don't think I do.
Okay, if you have general comments, closer to the end of the agenda, there's an opportunity for public delegations.
All right, I'll wait till then. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, If that's it, I'll just read in the recommendation at this time. That staff report P 2021-13 housekeeping amendments to site plan control bylaw be received, and that council enact and pass an amending bylaw to site plan control bylaw number 2010-082. Could I have a mover and a seconder for this? That would be Deputy Mayor Hall, followed by Vice Chair Jeffrey. Would there be any comments from the committee? Okay, I'll move the matter to a vote. All in favor? And Councillor Doherty is just finding her card. Thank you. Okay, and that's unanimous. Thank you. The next matter on the agenda is item 7. It's reports and minutes of other committees and boards. So the first one is with respect to the minutes of the Heritage Committee meeting held April 19, 2021, and that be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Vice Councillor Jeffrey, followed by Councillor Doherty. Would the standing committee have any questions or comments concerning the minutes of the as so described? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, please raise your cards. And that's unanimous. Thank you. The next one is the Collingwood Downtown BIA Board of Management. This is with respect to their meeting of April the 8th. And there's a recommendation here that I'll read. Whereas the building materials list of the Heritage Committee has not been revised since its inception, be it resolved that the BIA Board of Management requests that the Heritage Committee and Council consider a review and update of the recommended building materials list to reflect the new innovations of materials which are compatible with the heritage renovations within the district. Now, I understand that Jennifer McEwen would like to speak to the committee on this matter. Is that correct?
Yeah, Chair Hamlin, Jennifer is in the audience. I believe that she's just been unmuted, so she should be.
There, can you hear me now?
We can.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Well, through the chair and hello to everyone else as well. I wanted to address the BIA's request to consider an update of the recommended materials list. The committee's discussions led us to our motion to request to defer the discussion to a later time regarding the materials update. We were taken a little bit off guard. Firstly, with this new pilot project for the committees, we were down to 3 voting members. But we're fortunate that we had 2 new voting members join us at that most recent meeting. As well, the BIA's intention to put this motion forward was not stated on the agenda, and this did not give us time to research properly or to consult with relative departments in order to make an informed decision. It's not our usual type of requests either. I did ask the BIA if there was something specific with their concerns regarding materials. Their response didn't offer any specific materials, applications, or reasons. And I believe they are referring to the appropriate and inappropriate material list found in section 14, new construction, which also deals with downtown core. I had also asked the committee for thoughts and comments, so I have a few of those here. Some of the feedback and comments were any bylaw changes would still fall under the Ontario Heritage Act. Our own heritage plan or bylaws refer to materials in many different sections throughout the bylaws with a common consistency in wording and intent. And some examples would be under section 5, objections and guidelines, retain and conserve heritage buildings by applying accepted principles and standards for heritage conservation. Under objection and guidelines, again, retain, repair, restore. If you go to section 12, preservation, guiding principles, number 3, repair, conserve rather than replace building materials and finishes except where necessary. 4, repair with like materials. So this type of wording seems to be consistent throughout many sections of the plan. So there's a number of questions that still need to be addressed. Another comment was that, would we need to get an accredited professional to do a peer review or report in order to make an informed decision? And would this be at the expense of the BIA or the town? Now, regarding materials, it seems that material costs have been a concern. Our supply chain and economy has been taking a hit. Many commodities and assets have seen increases: wood, glass, plumbing, tiles, and other building supplies, as well as housing, food, and gas. Increases have been for a number of different reasons. COVID shutdowns have slowed production. New housing building has been at a high. With so many people at home, there's been an increase in home repair and rental projects unanticipated by the stores, and it's left shelves empty. Transportation shutdowns and then gas increases. The mills were down with shutdowns, and now they're scrambling to catch up and keep up with increased demand while weighing out the risk and costs of adding production facilities, or if this is just a temporary or short-term problem. And the Suez Canal was blocked by a cargo ship, which was blocking yet more supplies to come through. Now, through COVID, the committee has taken each request on a case-by-case basis, not precedent setting, and we've been mindful and sympathetic to the challenges of heritage property owners and what they face with their stewardship. So perhaps we could also be more diligent by including in the motions that they are exceptions being made due to current circumstances, whether it's COVID, economy, etc. So the committee has, through the discussions, that has led us to our motion to request to defer the discussion regarding the materials update list. So thank you. And does anybody have any questions?
Committee, does anyone have any questions? Deputy Mayor Hall, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you to the deputy, just what's the definition of defer? Like defer indefinitely or defer for a period of time?
To a future meeting. I don't have the exact wording from the minutes in front of me.
Okay.
But for future discussion so that we can make an informed decision and get some consultation. I mean, do we want to open up this can of worms to start changing the bylaws? Do we need to get accredited people in to do those reports? And is there room in the budget for that? There's a number of questions that haven't been answered for us to make any kind of recommendation on that request by the BIA.
Yes, follow up, Deputy Mayor Hall.
I guess I would ask through you to perhaps staff through the CAO. Is there a comment from Director Farr or from Planner Teakle, who's the representative?
Director Farr.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Deputy Mayor Hall. I don't have a comment on this right now. However, earlier or late last year, the committee entertained a delegation from ERA Architect who visited and provided some insight into the latitude that the committee can exercise in exploring various different types of development within the Heritage District. And I think that based on that discussion, this proposal might be coming from that. So a willingness to expand the scope of what's contemplated within the Heritage District within an acceptable range. I will consult further with the Heritage Planner on this and consider what specific steps might be required to look into this further, and I can provide an update accordingly. And I'd expect also that the Heritage Planner will be in a more detailed discussion with the committee, but I'll certainly speak with them and direct him to engage in those discussions with the committee.
Deputy Mayor Hall, did you have any follow-up to that?
Not at the moment, thank you.
Okay, Vice Chair Jeffrey.
Thank you very much. I think particularly from the financial impact alone in terms of what needs to be done and whether a consultant needs to be engaged, I'm happy to refer this back to the Heritage Committee for further discussion and consult with our staff to bring back to the committee a complete and comprehensive recommendation as to how we move forward with this, or that we don't. So.
Okay, and would you put a time frame on that, Vice Chair Jeffrey?
I think I would. I just don't know that staff could have it done just by the next Heritage meeting, but if Director Farr thought that, I'm a little reluctant to put a fixed time, which is why I said refer rather than defer, because I don't know the timelines that would be required to get back to us with the thorough answer we would need to make this decision.
Okay, Director Farr, did you have a comment on that?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, Councillor Jeffrey. This issue is related to increasing the range and the scope of materials that are permissible within in the district. And when the committee received the delegation from this architect from ERA Architects, established prestigious firm in the area of heritage planning, he spoke to ways in which money expended on heritage projects can be focused on key portions of buildings where the money invested had the greatest effect, whereas portions of facade that, for example, were visible to the public didn't warrant the same expense and could potentially employ lesser cost materials. Of course, at the same time, material costs have gone up. When he did appear, costs were on the rise. I don't think that it's the primary motivation. I think it reflects in that discussion and the questions that I heard the committee members are asking. It seemed to reflect an effort to arrive at a balance that maintains the integrity of the district by balancing the cost of rehabilitation with the very important objectives of heritage preservation. And I think that I would prefer to speak with the heritage planner to understand the scope of what is being considered here. We could explore further potentially any costs, so that it's better understood that whether this is a small or a medium-sized project. And I think that might be helpful to moving forward the discussion, because I think there's a legitimate interest in exploring these solutions for the various purposes that I just mentioned.
So then I would refer it back to the next Heritage Committee meeting to come to our the following Development and Operations Committee meeting.
Okay, thank you. Are there any, yes, Deputy Clerk Dahl.
We do have another person in the gallery who wants to speak, so I just didn't want you to forget about that as you're going through all the members here.
Yeah, no, I won't. Were there any other questions of Jennifer McEwen? Okay. Thank you. Okay, we'll have our next speaker then.
I believe she's speaking on behalf of the ACO.
Okay.
Yes. Hello again.
Hi.
Chair Hamlin and committee members, staff, and community. I'm representing the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, Collingwood branch tonight. ACO's mandate is to encourage the conservation and reuse of structures, districts, landscapes of architectural, historic, and cultural significance. Today, I'd like to bring the focus of our mandate to Collingwood. We are supportive of the Heritage Committee's recommendation to defer the BIA's recommendation that Council consider a review of the building materials list for the Downtown Heritage Conservation District. We would also like to take our support of the committee a step further by recommending that Council and the committee not support opening the bylaw for review. We feel that it is unnecessary to throw away what the town and the heritage committees have worked to support for 19 years. Throughout this time, the majority of property owners have complied with this bylaw. I can attest to this as a past Heritage Committee member, vice chair, and chair. The BIA is requesting a review of building materials that are used to maintain and preserve the historic architecture of our downtown buildings. The present recommended materials are true to the history and to the architecture and to the craftsmanship of the time in which these properties were built. The materials used were natural and carry the potential of restoration instead of replacement and landfill. My next point, I'm mentioning Michael McClelland, who is the recent guest speaker of the Heritage Committee, who Director Farr was referring to. He is a renowned architect, and he did share his thoughts on how to protect our heritage here in Collingwood. He felt that our district needs the highest degree of conservation because of the quality of our buildings. Collingwood is a leader in its efforts to preserve and to protect our cultural and built heritage. Supportive grants and tax incentives have contributed to supporting the town's heritage bylaws. The town was wise to change our 2002 heritage guidelines into bylaws in 2008 to ensure further protection of our conservation district, The town also recognizes preserving heritage through its strategic plan, of which ACO had the opportunity to contribute. Presently, each owner has to apply for a heritage permit for any maintenance or restoration to the exterior of a heritage property. If the request is to use inappropriate materials, the Heritage Committee discusses each application on an individual basis. There would be no change to this process, even if the bylaw section pertaining to materials were changed. This committee, as well as council, should recognize the budget implications to changing the heritage bylaw. The review of the materials list would have to be done by a Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals accredited person. These recommendations would then have to be peer reviewed. In summary, ACO does not support changing the appropriate building material list as recommended by the BIA. ACO supports Collingwood's well-developed bylaws that have supported in the past and hopefully will continue to support our heritage in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Would any committee member wish to pose questions to Margaret? Nope, seeing none. Thank you very much. Nice to hear from you again. Would there be any other speakers, Deputy Clerk Dahl?
I do have one more speaker. Richard Lex would like to speak, so we'll just unmute him.
Thank you.
Yes, hello, Richard Lex, 461 St. Marie Street. Thank you, Committee Chair Hamlin and committee members for the opportunity to speak to this issue. Addressing you here today as a BIA member and also as a heritage property owner in the district. As you know, we have one of the finest and I would suggest one of the most successful heritage districts in the province. The district rules have guided the restoration and revitalization of the entire downtown for the past almost 2 decades. The Conservation District, it can be argued, is the town's most important tourist attraction and, more importantly, a vast source of pride for the residents. The request by the BIA board to open up the list of materials to other than those that are noted in the heritage standards would be a fundamental change and a serious weakening of our district rules. It's important to note that the materials list is only for buildings which are generally considered exceptional heritage buildings, those built between the 1880s and around 1910. Newer buildings, non-heritage buildings in the district, and new construction already have much looser building material lists. So really, we're just talking about those true heritage buildings in the district that add tremendous character to our downtown streetscape. Appropriate and allowable materials, according to our 2008 Heritage Plan, are the same as plans in other heritage districts, almost exclusively being brick, stone, and wood. The importance of original materials is noted in the Provincial Policy Statement, the Ontario Heritage Toolkit, and the Standards and Guidelines for the Conservation of Historic Properties in Canada. This is the same organization that added our downtown as the first district on the list of historic places in Canada, a designation that Collingwood is proud of and often promotes. In the internationally recognized 8 guiding principles of conservation of historic properties, 2 of these principles deals with materials. Number 3, respect for historic material, and number 4, respect for the original fabric. It is simply a fundamental principle of heritage conservation. It's interesting to note that the town of Beaton in the municipality of New Tecumseh is in the process of forming a new heritage district. Their heritage district plan uses some great examples from Collingwood, and as with other conservation districts, their proposed standards and guidelines will also require original materials. There's no question that heritage rules can potentially add extra cost to renovation and maintenance. Understanding that there are additional regulations put upon heritage property owners, the town has wisely provided some property tax relief and heritage renovation grants. I understand that council is reviewing the level of the heritage property tax relief. Both this and a review of the heritage renovation grant would be a helpful step to heritage property owners and more useful in the conservation process than the weakening of the rules. The Collingwood Heritage Conservation District is defined by its architecture and its materials. They go hand in hand. They are what gives this collection of historic buildings their authenticity and integrity. I ask council to continue to respect heritage principles and specifically our heritage district plan and turn down the BIA request. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts on this, Rec. Would any of the committee members like to pose questions of Mr. Lex? Okay, seeing none. Is there anyone else, Deputy Clerk Dahl, who would like to speak to this?
No, there's no one else this evening.
Okay. So I need a mover and a seconder to put this motion on the floor. No takers.
The Deputy Mayor had his card up to speak.
Oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor Hall.
Well, I just wanted to make comment, but I don't know if I can make comment if it's not on the floor. So I'll put my card up to at least put it on the floor. If nobody wants to second it, that's fine.
Okay, well, okay, Mayor Saunderson has seconded it. Would you like to lead off the discussion then, Deputy Mayor Hall?
So I'm certainly not going to die on this hill. I certainly have opinions as it relates to heritage. They seem to be contrary to others as it relates to the opinion of value. I've stated time and time again as to where I think we are in the state of, from an economic standpoint. And I fully appreciate where the three individuals who have spoken and who have true expertise and true passion are coming from. But at the same time, I think that there is an appreciation of balance. And the balance is that the economy of scale from, say, the creation of the Heritage Conservation District and to what we are dealing with today in terms of land value and building value and the ability to be able to maintain those buildings has to have some weight of consideration. I think the spirit in which this was proposed through the BIA was simply to have a conversation, not to reopen a bylaw. It was just to have a conversation. So I think the reaction has been a little heavy-handed. And quite frankly, as somebody who is supportive of the BIA and is supportive of some of the work that they have done and what they have quite frankly had to endure in the last year, I will use this opportunity because I know, Councillor Hamlin, you are aware of this. I was prepared to bring forward a notice of reconsideration tonight, and I will be bringing it forward next week to ask council to reconsider the voting right of the BIA member within the Heritage Committee. So with that said, I get it. But there's a difference when somebody buys a building for $100,000 and when they buy a comparable building now for $1.5 million, and what their ability is to do from an economy of scale to restore that building. And you know, I'm learning as well. I will fully acknowledge that in one of my discussions here, I think at Development Operations or maybe even at Council, I was talking about vinyl versus wood. And Margaret Mooy sent us an email, and she gave me some good information that I wasn't aware of. And I simply raised that because it's part of a conversation. And I think that's all the BIA is looking for, is the ability to say, you know what, it costs a lot of money to own these buildings. Can we have a conversation about the economy of scale? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Mayor Saunderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree that this is a conversation. We have a wonderful heritage district, but given what we heard from our Director Farr, I would like to refer it back to staff as Councillor Jeffrey had suggested earlier, and hopefully she'll be prepared to second it so that we can have our staff weigh in on this conversation. We want to make sure that we have best practices here in preserving our heritage district without putting undue burden on the owners. And I think it's a legitimate discussion to be had. So I would look to refer this back to staff so that it can go to the Heritage Committee with our input at their next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Before I deal with that, are there any other comments on anyone would like to make? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. I was not prepared to support the original motion for the reasons that have been stated by our deputants, and from my own point of view, it's important to recognize what is truly heritage in terms of material and workmanship, and what is Disneyfication of our downtown. But I am prepared to support a motion to include staff in a conversation with the Heritage Committee, and then come back to this committee for further input.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we have Mayor Saunderson's motion. Would there be a seconder for this? Councillor Vice Chair Jeffrey, thank you. Any further comment on that? All in favor? And that would be unanimous. Thank you. Right. So the next matter on the agenda is our consent agenda. So I'm going to read in the recommendation here. This is item 8, that the general consent agenda, having been given due consideration by standing committee, be received. And further, that the information and opinions provided in the general consent agenda items are that of the authors and are not verified or approved as being correct. 8.1, Township of the Archipelago, Road Management Action on Invasive Phragmites. 8.2, NVCA Board Meeting Highlights from April 2021. 8.3, Town of Amhertsburg Planning Act Timelines, and 8.4, Hydro One Vegetation Maintenance Program. Could I have a mover and a seconder for this agenda, please? Vice Chair Jeffrey, Deputy Mayor Hall. All those in favor, please raise your cards. That is unanimous. Would any member of the committee care to have any items pulled? Councillor Doherty, followed by Vice Chair Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, 8.1, invasive Phragmites.
Okay. Would you like to deal with that now?
Certainly. Yes, I will, I guess herein provide notice of motion that I will bring back to the council meeting on May 5th to support this motion with some reworking. MTO staff themselves now classify Phragmites as the worst invasive species in Ontario and in fact in Canada right now. And this motion or resolution from the township to the province is simply asking that best management practices be adopted in the treatment of Phragmites, and that the MTO be mapping Phragmites, and that all levels of government consider funding support for eradication of Phragmites on our highways and byways. So unless there's any request for further elaboration, I will bring that forward on May 25th.
Okay, thank you. That's great. Any questions of Councillor Doherty on that at this time? Okay, Vice Chair Jeffrey, what item would you like pulled?
8.4, and it was just, I was curious how much maintenance that would really require from Hydro One in Collingwood. It just didn't stipulate in any information in the letter as to location or where. I was just curious, and I thought maybe anybody reading the agenda might also as well.
Director Slama, would you like to address that question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Hamlins. Through you to Councillor Jeffrey, I believe it just includes Poplar Side Road.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. All right. Okay, so that's that item complete. Next is number 9, which is departmental updates. There are 2 listed there, and I believe our CAO wishes to do an introduction to the ones that are listed.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. And I think that there is a very short deck provided just so that we can make sure that we have some clarity on this piece. I know it is one of immense interest to the community and certainly one of our very highest priorities. Just wait until the deck appears here. So we're not asking that any decisions be made today, but we wanted to show what had happened since our last opportunity, which I believe was on the 3rd, to update council and or appropriate committees. So we could go to the second slide, please. So the situation, there's nothing new here in the situation, but just for those who are tuning in today or aren't clear yet on what's happening, is that we do have drinking water supply that is safe and available. And we have some water that is not being used yet, so a little bit more capacity in the plant. But it's not enough to get us, certainly at the current rate of building, to the 2025 plant expansion. So we've used a tool that we can use under the Planning Act called an interim control bylaw. But basically it temporarily and transparently pauses most development while we figure out how to grow as a complete community. So over the next 4 or so years until we're sure we can get to that 2025 plant expansion. We've committed to immediately do a land use policy study and to accelerate to the extent we can the construction of the new plant and or look to see if there are staging opportunities, which there may or may not be, but there was a report that talked to that at a recent meeting. And we just wanted to assure the community that for the smaller projects, the work that doesn't use more water, such as most residential renovations and additions, can continue. And if residents wanted to figure out if their work could continue, they can approach through the normal processes, the building or planning departments, depending on the type of approval that they would require. So things like, renovating your house or putting up a fence or a deck generally would be able to go forward. And I want to assure everybody that addressing this challenge is one of the town's highest priorities. This is something that was very unexpected by council. It came forward through a technical change that affected our winter water quantities. And we are working through it as fast as we can. And to that end, we've made the commitment to update the public and council members at meetings like tonight's. Next slide, please. So there's 2 agenda items. The first one here, I'm going to turn it over to Director Slama to let you know what's happened in the last week on the water capacity front, please.
Thank you, CAO Skinner. Next slide, please. So since our most recent update, we have been able to complete a few of the tasks that were identified for us. So we've met with the local engineers group who reached out. We had one initial meeting, and we are having a subsequent meeting later on this week. We've addressed some commonly asked questions on the Engage page on our town website. We had an opportunity to meet with the administrative and technical staff of the town of the Blue Mountain and talk with them about the opportunity for a reduced supply. And subsequent to the initial meeting, the technical staff from both municipalities had some further discussion. Some items that we're waiting for or that are in progress include new Tecumseh staff. We're still waiting for a reply from them on what opportunities they might be able to, what opportunities are there for reduced supply to new Tecumseh, and whether that could be year round or whether that's a winter only reduced supply. And after our discussion with Town of Blue Mountains, we committed to organizing a discussion with Town of Blue Mountains, New Tecumseh, and representatives from the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, just to talk about what a reduced supply to those other communities, how that would affect them, and what just any kind of ministry related considerations, and have that discussion with ministry representatives. And Collingwood is to reply to New Tecumseh 3-year plant expansion agreement. So we're working on our comments for that. And we'll also be hearing, as I mentioned, some more recommendations from the local engineering group on our meeting later this week. Next slide, please. Sorry, I'll add one more thing to that other slide, which is advancing the RFP for our water treatment plant expansion. We have been working on that document, which we did have well underway, and it is our intention to release that document this week, by the end of the week. So some key questions that have come forward since the last update. One that was brought forward is, will this affect having water available for the new hospital? So our hospital in Collingwood today is currently well served by the water allocation that they have from our system. And the recent information that we have from Infrastructure Ontario indicates that they'd be looking at constructing the new hospital, starting construction of the new hospital in 2025. And this coincides nicely with close to the completion of our water treatment plant expansion, so we don't anticipate there being any problem. And another question that came forward was, will this affect the location of the proposed new high school? So currently that location is yet to be determined by the board. And so once we see that location and we have a conversation with the board on what the new school might look like and what the difference in the allocation may be, we'd have to understand that better. But certainly a new school fits in with the complete communities that council will be considering through the land use study, and we're confident that there's opportunities to have conversations there with the board about the new school once the location is determined. Next slide, please. This is just a progress timeline of how we see moving through to the expanded water treatment plant expansion. So right now, as I mentioned, we're just finalizing the design RFP, but the next step would be to advertise an award, that engineering design, complete the preliminary and detailed designs, move to tender and award of the construction contract, and expand our water treatment plant. And along that progress, we need to finalize our agreement with New Tecumseh, which may happen during the detailed design and certainly will be in place before we enter into a construction contract. Next slide, please. And with that, I'll pass it over to Director Farr to provide an update on the land use planning policy study.
Thanks, Peggy. This brief presentation provides an update on the land use planning policy study. Next slide, please. Staff recently met with representatives of the Jordan Triangle Development Institute, as was directed by council. A commonly asked questions page has been set up on the Engage Collingwood website. We're proceeding generally in accordance with the details set out in report 2021-12. That's the report dealing with the interim control bylaw in the land use planning policy study that was presented on April 26th and is available on the town's website. And next slide, please. We're generally following the intent on scoping that was set out in that report. We initiated discussion with selected consulting firms. We continue to receive and review correspondence from people with concerns about the implications of the interim control bylaw. In the event that staff return with any comment on those matters, it would be in the context of the appropriate report, and it would be posted accordingly in advance. I don't have a comment on realtors being able to explain how this will affect their purchase. We have received inquiries from various different individuals with concerns about the implications, and staff are working to respond to those when they arrive. Next slide, please. This is a general overview of matters that are set out in more detail in the report P 2021-12 on the interim control bylaw on the land use planning policy study, and that's posted on the town's website. in association with the April 26th meeting. Next slide, please. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Is that the completion of the update, CEO Skinner? Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Mayor Saunderson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, staff, for the update. I'm wondering when we're hoping to deal with some of the exemption provisions. Do we have an idea when that will be coming back to council?
Director Farr, would that be something you could answer?
Through you, Madam Chair, Mayor Saunderson, as I indicated, we're reviewing correspondence as it comes in. Some of that correspondence duplicates some of the presentations and the presentation content that was presented to council on April 26th. And in reviewing those matters, as I said, in the event that we return with a comment, we'll be providing that comment in the context of the report, and we'll post it in advance.
Any follow-up, Mayor Saunderson?
No, that's we'll follow up on Monday, a week from now. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know there was another card up. Councillor Doherty, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to Director Slama. On the timeline toward the completion of the full water treatment plant expansion, there isn't a reference to the completion of just a larger chlorine dosing tank that had been indicated as part of the project that could be undertaken in advance of the complete expansion, so that we would have additional capacity potentially before 2025. And I was just wondering where that stood.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Doherty. So we have included that provision in the request for proposal for the engineering design. We have indicated that it is the town's preference to advance that component as we were directed by council. So that has been included in the RFP from a design and a construction perspective. And it will need to also be included in the construction tender when that comes forward. So we have included it, just neglected to indicate it on that flow chart.
Okay, thank you. Any other committee member wish to pose a question? Deputy Mayor Hall, followed by Vice Chair Jeffrey.
Very briefly, 2 comments. One, thank you for the presentation. Excellent update. My comment would be that through to staff and potentially chairs of various meetings, that if this could be moved up in the agenda, it would be appreciated. I think that there are probably more people watching at home. And I'll be completely transparent. I probably would be focusing better myself if it was earlier in the evening. So the second is I appreciate the direct reference to the high school. I watched the playback on YouTube of the Simcoe County District School Board meeting that occurred, I think, 2 Wednesdays ago now. And it was perhaps made in jest, but there was a deputation that clearly referenced the benefits of moving from one community to another because of this issue. And quite frankly, it's not funny. I understand the intent, but I appreciate the update because it cannot be more imperative that we have to be crystal clear with the messaging as to these important capital projects. High school's out of our purview per se, but that's paramount to the community's success moving forward. And obviously it goes without saying the hospital. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And if I may, one final, I hope that if there's any media that's actually watching still, maybe they pick up on that final point about the high school.
Thank you, Vice Chair Jeffrey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question. I'm sorry, I got kicked out of iCompass and I might have missed it. Do we have a specific deadline for the hiring of the consultant in Director Farr's continuum there?
Director Farr?
Through you, Madam Chair, our deadline is as soon as possible. So we've initiated discussions with selected consultants, and we're advancing, as I've indicated, as quickly as possible in accordance with the general details set out in the staff report B 2021-12.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is that all the comments on this? Okay, thank you. Would there be any additional items staff would like to bring forward to the standing committee? CAO Skinner. Oh, Councillor Doherty, did you want to ask a question first?
No, I think I was jumping the gun. I was looking for other business, but
Okay,
let
just
staff
hold
have
that
their
thought.
other business first.
Yeah, hold that thought. Okay, CO Skinner.
Thank you, Chair Hamlin. I just had a very brief update about the Ethnic Mosaic Alliance proposal that we made. You'll recall that after council endorsement last September, we put in a proposal to be the potential site of a multicultural center in Simcoe County. And there's a great spot that I think the Deputy Clerk Dahl or her staff may put up, but it's next to the Awen Gathering Place. And you'll see in this schematic, which is really just general in nature, where the number 3 is, the brown building shown in the center bottom of the diagram, was a location that we had suggested to the group may work. And we understand that by the deadline, 6 municipalities in Simcoe had indicated an interest. To date, the Ethnic Mosaic Alliance has not received the funding they're seeking from the province, the Ministry of Infrastructure, Community, Culture and Recreation. They believe it to be quite promising. And they did hold a workshop on May 6th, and Executive Director Culver attended that workshop to provide us with more information about a detailed proposal they're now seeking by June 11th. As part of that, they would want the commitment to the land, which Council had already provided endorsement to offer. And we did have some small concerns with their business plan, as they do need to still raise 33% of the funding to execute on their intentions, which is over $2 million. And they have some dependency on building rentals, et cetera, to remain viable, but we're just monitoring that. And they have noted that they're awaiting the proposals based both on a central location within Simcoe County and a site of 1 to 2 acres. And ours is under 1 acre, but nonetheless, it's provided within a context that I think is absolutely top notch. And we'll put together, pending any advice to the contrary from Council, the best proposal that we can. And if there's any outstanding items, additional updates, or potentially even a copy of the proposal, we're going to have our SIC meeting in June, 4 or 5 days before that proposal is due. And just to close off, in case anybody hasn't placed this is behind the McDonald's in town, on the waterfront side of the McDonald's that this location would be. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, CAO Skinner. That's very interesting. Would there be any questions of our CAO with respect to her update? Okay, seeing none. Item number 10, public delegations. Deputy Clerk Dahl, would there be any public delegations this evening?
Sorry, Chair Hamlin. I think that the planning department had that other part law control matter to bring an update for.
I think we were going to deal with that under other business, perhaps. Vice Chair Jeffrey, did you have a preference on that?
No, I think we left it within departmental updates.
Okay, all right. So let's deal with that now. Director Farr, would you like to take the floor?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Councillor Jeffrey, for making the motion in regards to this request. Council has dealt with similar requests as this. This is for part lot control.
Excuse me. I have a conflict and I'm going to recuse myself. Thank you. And I'll turn this over to Vice Chair Jeffrey. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Madam Chair, this is a matter that Council has seen before. It deals with a part lot control application where time is of the essence and a request is being made from a developer to advance part lot control to the next upcoming meeting of Council in order to gain approval. And the next meeting of Council would be May 17th. The matter in question deals with part lot control, which is it's simply an administrative tool for the division of units in a townhouse block. In this case, the request deals with 9 townhouse blocks in the Eden Oak Indigo subdivision. Those townhouse blocks have all received building permits. The building permits have been issued. And staff, if committee was to enable this to advance to Council on the 17th for approval consideration, would make doubly sure that the part lot control and building permit issuance is fully in compliance with the interim control bylaw. However, as our understanding is the building permits have all been issued, it would appear that this has been dealt with and is not restricted by the provisions of the interim control bylaw. As I indicated, it's 9 blocks, which amounts to 35 townhouse units, and there are pending closings. And to the extent that we can be helpful to advance this, staff are requesting Council's assistance or committee's assistance and recommending that the matter be expedited to the May 17 meeting of Council.
Okay. Thank you, Director Farr. So to the Deputy Clerk, do we require waiving of notice or anything from a committee perspective to do this?
To the Vice Chair, my concern was with the staff report not being on tonight's agenda and just going to the Council meeting, that would be superseding the recommendations and public comment of the Standing Committee. So I guess the recommendation would be that the Standing Committee support Director Farr's request to expedite the staff report to the Council meeting of May 17th.
Okay, all right. So we have the new wording. And then to clarify, the building permits have already been issued. And this is one of our typical housekeeping items in defining the lines for the building of the townhouses, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, great. All right, so could I have a mover and a seconder for that? Thank you, Mayor Saunderson, Deputy Mayor Hull. Are there any comments with respect to this? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. And we can have Chair Hamlin back.
Here I am. Thank you. Okay, item number 10, public delegations. Deputy Clerk Dahl, do we have any this evening?
Through the chair, I believe we have one person wishing to speak, and it's Matt Pretty.
Thank you.
Matt, you should be good to go.
All right, Becky, thanks. Very full meeting tonight, definitely updating, and I've been attentive with following the meetings. I definitely hear what Deputy Mayor Hall is saying about adjusting the times. I know Monday was a long meeting and SIC or corporate communications went to Thursday, you know, and just it's all, there's a lot going on. Obviously capacity is a big issue. I'd like to really extend a thank you to the police department, to the public works department, to the construction companies that are doing amazing work in Collingwood and in South Georgian Bay. I see cars every day passing through from 905, 416, GTA, you know, all over the place coming up here, and that's part of our traffic mix. I'm a young person, but I feel I have some abilities and connections to what's going on. I do think we need to let go of frustration and really look at the future and say, you know what an exciting time. And there's an election next year, as far as I understand, as I've followed with Town Council, 2022. We're going to emerge out of this COVID crisis. Germany is allowing Johnson & Johnson for all adults right now. I just saw that on CP24. And the May 20th issue of opening up, that's going to be a big game changer, because I saw, the fellow from, some members of the business community downtown, and, Starbucks patios closed, like all these kinds of things, and we have to be careful. As a young person, I am registered for vaccine, but I am nervous about just one choice. It's so difficult, but I think we need to really extend a thank you to everyone that has made this town what it is, and the historical revival. We need to really send a letter to the community through the paper and say, you know what, everyone, thank you. That what's that? Stay together, stronger together. Oh, the buses, it's such a good thing. The number 4, all the way to City of Barrie. And we've done a great job, the David Busby Center. Again, Deputy Mayor Hall, Kathy Jeffrey, Mayor Saunderson and team. Everyone's doing a great job. I want everyone to embrace each other. I understand the Pride Festival is scheduled for this year. As you know, I'm supporting the traditional parenting side, but nonetheless, let them have their day. And let's really get through this. Let's say, you know what, boys and girls, we can be strong. We can be a powerful community without dwelling on identity so much, and just say, together we are strong. And that's the message I'd like us to bring in. I saw the Coast Guard go through the other day. What an amazing sight. The fisheries boats out there, construction on Harbour Road, Heritage Road. We need to really absorb the understanding that we are here in 2021, and we need to be thankful, we need to have a good attitude, and we need to be ready to receive the interest. And what an amazing report about this multicultural center. Hey, I'm all for it. And let's really absorb and open up to receive the interest that supposedly is heading this way. We need to be open to receive that. Great job, Manager Velik, Ms. Slama, Director Parr, the whole team. Keep on going. And yeah, exactly, the school. Let's put that on the front page. Let's talk about education. Let's talk about the difficulties that the kids are going through and the parents, and trying to keep things in line. And let's connect with God, the Holy Spirit, and let's really do that. And let's stop getting all identity oriented on people. Yes, technology is very difficult these days, but we got to get back to basics, health and wellness, and let's really open up and receive where we can go for the next 100 years. And that is where we need to project ourselves in thinking of the future, what is sustainable, and how we are going to achieve harmony in the economy and the society. We have a lot of work to do, and I suggest people make a food garden to try and connect with the land more. I don't even know if I'm still on this recording or not, but I would say, food gardens.
You have 15 seconds, Matthew.
Okay, I'd like to promote food gardens. That's my bottom line for healthy community activities. Okay, Chair Hamlin, thank you for allowing me to connect, and I wish everyone well, and be careful out there. This is, we're not through this yet. We're still, actually the numbers are very high. Supposedly we're dealing with really high numbers, so we need to be very patient.
Okay.
Thank you. Signing off.
Thank you very much. Bye. Okay, was that the only public delegation this evening? Yes. Okay, so number 11 on the agenda would be other business. Kathy Jeffrey. Oh, wait, we got here. Councillor Doherty, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and through you to Director Farr. Last year, the notion of infill development and the compatibility of infill development in our existing neighborhoods came up, and there was indication that a staff report would be forthcoming. And now with the ICBL in place, I am wondering what can be accomplished in that regard.
Through you, Madam Chair. Staff are reviewing matters in accordance with Report P 2021-12, which is the Interim Control Bylaw and Land Use Planning Policy Study, which generally sets out the intent in regards to the land use planning policy study, scope, and general details therein. As that project advances, staff will return with updates to the council on the scope of that project. And it's in that context that you'd have a better understanding of the extent to which that study includes various different matters. Generally speaking, however, the intent at this time is to follow the details set out in that report. So for anyone with an interest, I would encourage them to review that report. It's available on the town's website in conjunction with the April 26 meeting agenda.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other business? Deputy Mayor Hall?
I'll be really brief. I just wanted to go back to something that Mr. Pretty had commented not 2 minutes ago, but prior to that. And when he referenced trades, and he's bang on. And my comment would be that contrary to when I went to school, where trades was something that was at the far end of the school and you never went down to that corridor, I think that Simcoe County as a county is doing a lot to be very proactive in terms of promoting the trades, not only from a marketing standpoint, but from an economic development standpoint, and is actually putting money behind various programs. And more importantly, the school board is also doing an excellent job in ensuring that young kids recognize the true opportunities in the trades. So anyway, I just wanted to acknowledge Matt's comment and let him know and others know that those two at the county and within the school board are doing a lot to promote, because he's bang on. There is serious opportunities for young people to make a very, very fine career out of the trades.
Yeah, well said. Any other business? Okay, I have one. And that is arising out of our discussion on the traffic calming. I'd like to ask the committee to support a request of a staff report on the possibility of setting a town-wide speed limit of 40 kilometers per hour, including consultation with the town of Wasaga Beach, if advisable. And I added the town of Wasaga Beach. Our consultant tonight indicated he was doing a study for them town-wide on lowering their speed limit to 40 and suggested we should consider perhaps coordinating with them. So I think that's just something obviously for staff to think about as if they were to report back on possibility of implementing town-wide speed limit of 40 kilometers an hour. Would anyone like to comment on this? Yeah, Deputy Kirkdall.
I believe this would be a notice of motion.
Okay.
To be considered at the next council meeting.
All right. So what, do I just read it in then now and then leave it? Yeah, okay, that was easy. Okay, would anyone else have any other business? All right, we are at item 12, adjournment. Kathy, Jeffrey, thank you again. All in favor? Turns out it's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Good night.